I'm drawing infinite cards in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 is here, coming. Tokyo Air Force General Base, Command Room. Commander Okamura, a non-commissioned officer, and a doorman correspondent, all three in the room held their breath with high tension, as if they were trying to hide the enemy's humor. They didn't even dare to take a breath. In this oppressive and suffocating atmosphere, the sound of footsteps in the corridor was getting closer and clearer, hitting their hearts heavily. Tread, the sound of footsteps stopped outside the door, and then a tall dark figure swept out. The moment he appeared, the room was filled with murderous intent and bloody smell. Commander Okamura has been able to obtain the current glorious military status. He has experienced countless battles and crawled out of the dead. But at this moment, he still sucked in a breath of cold air, his hair stood on end, he couldn't help but backed up and pressed his back against the wall, firmly suppressing the urge to escape here desperately. The enemy standing at the door couldn't be simply described as a human, it was clearly a humanoid monster. Its scarlet and slender eyes are indifferent and cold, and its tough and dark horny skin is stained with blood. The perfect muscle outline of the whole body presents a dangerous atmosphere of wildness and power. Its clenched fists and hands stretch out the sharp dark claws like wolves. Such a humanoid monster slowly walked into the room, and its body was full of the biological atmosphere of killing and tyrannical aesthetics, making it difficult for people to have any thoughts of wanting to fight against it. Like a bird, see a falcon. The difference between the two is the strength gap of several biological pyramid layers. Sure enough, it's here. The demonic humanoid monster grinned, and spit out fluent Japanese hoarsely, staring at Commander Okamura inside the room with scarlet eyes. Commander Okamura gasped even more in astonishment, put his hands on the desk to hide his weakness, and asked in horror, What kind of monster are you, Commander? Didn't you send 7 fighter planes here to kill me?" The humanoid monster smiled humanely, and exited the integrated form covered by venom, revealing the handsome face of a male youth. The tough cuticle on his body, as the black liquid flowed linearly, turned into a leather night suit. "It's you, Kyle from the U.S. Emperor." Commander Okamura looked in disbelief, staring blankly at Kyle, who had returned to his normal appearance. A few hours ago, through active discussions between Japanese officials and the military, it was decided that the Air Force would launch an attack on the target when it entered the sky over Tokyo, which severely frustrated the U.S. imperialists. As a result, the 7 Zydian fighters did not annihilate the opponent, but the opponent directly came to the door and forcibly broke into the Air Force General Base. Commander Okamura forced himself to accept the appalling facts, trembling all over, not knowing what to say. This is too unreasonable. Pretty Germany, which had withdrawn from the World War II battlefield, had no time to remind Risen, "Be careful with Kyle. After all, Kyle is such an unreasonable person. If he can do something, he will never be unreasonable. If he can be upright, he will never admit defeat." Existence represents the word powerful. The 7 Zydian fighters couldn't beat him, so they were all demolished. The Hydra base factory with stronger armed weapons, and the German military base with much more soldiers stationed there, these were all conquered by him all the way. How could Rissen's General Air Force Base stop it? 12 times the superhuman physique of human beings, plus hundreds of fighting skills against the enemy, and armed with the skin protection and characteristics of venom, ordinary soldiers are simply too vulnerable in front of Kyle. No matter how stubborn the Japanese soldiers are, they are not afraid of death, and they are all chickens and dogs under the absolutely crushing strength gap, vulnerable to a single blow. "Commander," Kyle stared at Commander Okamura indifferently, and said meaningfully, "I really want to experience your so-called Bushido spirit, so I came here as an appointment." Commander Okamura's face was livid with anger and shock, but soon he sighed heavily, and took down the fine short sword made of steel like a handicraft from the wall with a red sun flag hanging on the side. Both the non-commissioned officer and the correspondent bowed their heads and prostrated themselves on the ground, not daring to speak out to persuade them. Under Kyle's oppressive sharp eyes, Commander Okamura knelt on the ground decadently, holding the gleaming Tadeo in his backhand, finally gritted his teeth, and stabbed the Tadeo into his abdomen fiercely. He groaned in pain, and collapsed on his side on the ground, blood continuously overflowing along the blade like a spring. In Commander Okamura's view, He could not absolve himself of the blame for having offended an enemy he shouldn't have provoked in the fall of the Tokyo Air Force Base. It is an honorable sacrifice to be able to die by harikiri, which is respected by Bushido. Kyle's face was indifferent, looking at the Air Force commander lying in a pool of blood, as if he saw an ant ending his humble life. Rissing is somewhat similar to country in his previous world. One of the repulsive points is that they are pretentious and rampant, and they think they are superior to others and respect the spirit of Bushido. Kyle felt that it was a rare visit, and it was necessary to teach Rissing a lesson about what it means to be truly strong and invincible. "I won't kill you." Kyle glanced at the non-commissioned officers and correspondents on the ground, and said in an orderly tone, "You take the commander's body away and tell your emperor that I will visit the door soon." The non-commissioned officer and the correspondent exhaled with relief, and the two quickly stepped forward, each holding the hands and feet of Commander Okamura, and evacuated the office in 3 steps at a time. "By the way, bring this." Kyle suddenly remembered something, waved his palm, and firmly nailed a card to the commander's corpse's chest. On the back of the card was a black image of a demon grinning. It is not the totem of the national emblem of the U.S. Empire, nor is it the symbol of the U.S. military. It is just a demon card representing one's own position. He wants to shake and persecute the entire Rissin country by himself. This sentence has never been meant as a joke, but it will soon become a reality recorded in history. After the 2 Japanese soldiers left with the corpses, Kyle left the commander's office. At this moment, the base outside was in flames, and countless buildings were burning with flames. The fire was about to extend to the command building inside the base. On the vast ground in the meantime, the corpses of countless soldiers were also swallowed by the flames. The blood and fire reflected each other, and the night sky was scorched red and tragic. The General Air Force Base, as if it had been baptized by disaster, was devastated. There is a saying from the Soviet side, which is very apt to describe Kyle: wherever he goes, he is accompanied by war, disaster, and death. He is the apostle of hell, the incarnation of the devil, and a hero in the eyes of others. Kyle's footsteps speeded up, and he quickly passed between the burnt-out buildings, approaching the tarmac at the inner end of the Air Force Base. Of those parked fine Japanese fighter planes, many have entered the blue rank, so it would be a pity not to take them away by the way. According to his usual style of action, as long as he maintains the habit of drawing spoils on the battlefield, he will never lose money. Chapter 102. At in number 039, really here. It was late at night, almost the morning of the next day. The Rissin General Air Force Base suddenly burst into raging fire, which swept outwards without any signs of extinguishing. When the rescue team reacted to put out the fire and rescue, the fire centered on the base and spread to an area of several kilometers in radius. That night, countless people living in Tokyo woke up from the noise. Looking outside their houses, no matter how far they were, they could see the flames shooting up from one side of the sky. It was as if the sky was furious and was about to send down punishment from heaven. The Emperor's mansion, the current Emperor of World War II, was naturally awakened by his subordinates. He got up from the slumped bed in bewilderment, temporarily changed into a noble day robe with sleepy eyes, and arrived at a meeting hall amidst a burst of anxious urging. When he arrived at the conference hall in a dazed state, he saw the flames shining on the edge of the night sky in the courtyard outside the door, and listened to the frontline report of the General Air Force Base from a group of high-level officials, and he was completely awake under the trembling and shock. The Emperor leaned against the door as if doubting his life, turned his head and looked at a silent officer with his head down, and asked loudly, "What did you say?" "Say it again," the officer replied with a trembling voice. "Your Majesty, the General Air Force Base was attacked by the American Emperor Kyle just now, and now it has all been reduced to a sea of flames. Now the firefighting forces from all over Tokyo have gathered to prevent the fire from spreading." "Medi Kyle, is he a monster? How can a person invade the Air Force Base?" the Emperor murmured in disbelief. "According to the surviving correspondents in the base, he is probably really the incarnation of a monster. The bullets falling on him are completely ineffective, and the shell bombing can't kill him. And our soldiers will be easily shot when they meet each other." "Kill." After the officer gritted his teeth, he took out a blood-stained demon card from his pocket. He forced Commander Okamura to commit seppuku in the Air Force Base, left behind this demon card, and said. Seeing the hesitation on the officer's face, the Emperor couldn't help asking, "What else did you say?" He said that he will come to visit His Majesty the Emperor in the near future, and ask for advice on Bushido. As soon as the officer's words fell, the complexions of the high-level people in the hall changed. The emperor leaned against the door with a gloomy face. "Your Majesty the Emperor, calm down. You are the god of a country. How can you be afraid of an intruder in your own territory?" the men supporting the emperor reminded in a low voice. That's right, the emperor nodded quickly, calmed down forcibly, looked majestically at the cabinet officials and warlord officers in the hall, and asked, "What do you think? How should we deal with the invasion from the U.S. Emperor?" Madman, the representative of the warlords, Commander Sasaki, who controlled the Risen Army General Base, snorted coldly, and spoke first. "What can't be killed is mostly an excuse for the surviving soldiers to demonize the invaders in order to cover up their ineffective guarding," he said ruthlessly. "His Royal Highness, I suggest mobilizing half of the armed forces stationed in Tokyo to conduct a detailed search of Zen Risen in Tokyo. If you find the U.S. Emperor Kyle, you will be surrounded and killed immediately." The representative of the cabinet, Prime Minister Tanaka, lowered his eyebrows and echoed, "Yes, we are a country of samurai. No matter how strong people are, our samurai are stronger. While the armed forces are searching all over Tokyo, His Majesty the Emperor should hold a meeting tomorrow to appease the ordinary people in Tokyo in person, to make them believe that we have the ability and confidence to kill the invaders," Commander Sasaki added. "As for the news that the Air Force Base has been invaded and fallen, even if the people of Tokyo know it, it can only be controlled within the boundaries of Tokyo, and it must not be spread to let the enemy country see our jokes." The two bigwigs who held the real power of the country spoke, and of course the rest of the high-level people seconded it. The emperor secretly scolded the old fox, but he could only cater to it superficially. Tonight is destined to be a sleepless night for everyone in Risen Tokyo. And this is just the opening of the prelude. The real good show has not yet been staged. The next morning, Kyle attacked the General Air Force Base and destroyed it into scorched earth. This message is too important, like throwing a mine into a fish pond. No matter how high-level control and appeasement is, the relevant speeches and messages will still spread like wildfire. The unkillable monster, the devil of American imperialism, the war maniac who dominates Germany. Within a few hours, almost all the people in Risen Tokyo were discussing such topics in panic, and the name Medical Kyle lingered in everyone's mind like a nightmare fog. The emperor had no choice but to show up in the emperor's mansion, which had been 5 times more powerful, to give a speech in the name of God, stating that he would deal with the intruders as soon as possible, so as to forcibly appease the emotions of the people of Tokyo. Ordinary people were frightened, and armed soldiers searched the whole city cautiously. On the other hand, some pretentious samurai Ronin and Risen are just around the corner, excitedly rushing to Tokyo, wanting to take this opportunity to kill Kyle and become famous at the same time. Tokyo, Kurunami District, the main gymnasium of the Shinto Nannen School. Kyle, who had slightly disguised the appearance of the venom, stopped on the road in front of the gymnasium and looked up slightly. The fencing gymnasium in front of us covers a vast area, with more than a dozen Risen-style buildings stacked on top of each other. The main hall is as big as a modern gymnasium, and can accommodate nearly 1,000 people to learn swordsmanship together. Kyle stood tall and straight on the road, glanced coldly at the magnificent sword school gym, with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. Nissan's Bushido. It is unclear when and what month the origin can be traced back to, but it was in the Edo period that the shogunate recruited samurai, and the spirit respected by samurai prevailed. Risen's warriors major in swordsmanship, which is the art of killing later. Although the shogunate was overthrown and the new government issued an order to abolish swords, Nissan's follow-up samurai still advocated practicing swordsmanship. They believed that samurai should be matched with kendo, and a strong samurai is invincible. This situation has continued to this day. Dozens of different kendo schools have been passed down, and the main body basically settled in Tokyo, the most prosperous place in Risen. When the soldiers of the Japanese army were young, they were also taught by the swordsmanship gymnasium. In a sense, these schools of kendo are the cornerstones of authority that can represent Bushido, and they are also the spiritual pillars that Nissan warriors consider themselves superior to others. The emperor, Nissan high-level officials, and armed soldiers at the military base are all cautiously guarding against surprise attacks unexpectedly. Kyle's goal has temporarily shifted. He wants to trample and destroy Risen's Bushido cornerstone first. Kyle walked confidently, and the clothes of Risen passerby on his body began to change, turning back into a cool and dark night suit, and walked firmly and powerfully to the main entrance of the kendo gym, reading notice. This is a fictional Marvel world. Some regions, historical events and reality are only similar, not the real world. Why are some book friends still haven't figured it out? Relaxing, entertaining and reading books are all you need to do, and those who talk about reality are just asking for fun. Chapter 103 Sword Master? Recently, the Sword Hall is not open to the outside world. Please don't approach it casually. Who? Is there an invitation card? Kyle had just approached the grand main entrance of the swordsmanship gymnasium, and his black combat uniform was particularly conspicuous. The two young men in white kimonos and wooden long swords guarding the entrance both took a step forward, stretching out their hands to intercept them with vigilance. Tell your owner? Kyle smiled faintly, walked up the steps without stopping, and said calmly, just say it. Beauty Kyle, come and challenge. Medi Kyle? The two young people gasped, and looked at each other. Each other's faces were full of horror. After all, it was only one night, and the whole of Tokyo seemed to be hit by a magnitude, earthquake, causing the whole country to panic. The man who is said to be a demon. Rising's emperor publicly condemned his crimes last night at his mansion. Countless armed soldiers are conducting a comprehensive search in the urban area of Tokyo. As a result, such an unexpected visitor has come to their sword sect gymnasium? Kyle kept his unhurried pace. Every time he took a step forward, the two gate guard youths took a few steps back. When he reached the main entrance, the gate guard had rushed into the gymnasium in panic, shouting as he walked, "It's Kyle from the US Emperor. He's here, the demon who destroyed the Air Force Base last night and threatened the Emperor came to us. Hurry up, people." Within a short while, dozens of young men dressed as fencing disciples rushed out of the gymnasium, holding sharp swords and kicking clogs. But when they rushed to within 3 meters of Kyle, they all stopped in their tracks, their faces solemn and vigilant. They dared not approach, and they kept a safe distance from those facing them with swords. Kyle didn't even look at them. He walked indifferently and calmly, surrounded by sword-wielding people, and soon stepped into the main hall of the main gymnasium. More and more swordsmanship disciples surrounded him, from dozens to hundreds of people, surrounding Kyle inside and outside, but no one followed the moving ones and did not make a move. Fortunately, the hall of the gymnasium is spacious enough to accommodate hundreds of people to learn swordsmanship at the same time. The wooden floor is as clean as new, and the inner walls are equipped with shelves for practicing wooden swords. In the center is a huge plaque written in ink. Shinto no mind genre as one of the cornerstones of Bushido. The Shinto Wunin Ryu mastering high-end swordsmanship can rank in the top 10 schools of Kendo inherited by Risen. Although it is not the strongest in the industry, it has the largest number of disciples. The authority of the Kendo genre. During the current war period, all the disciples in the gymnasium are inner disciples, and there are hundreds of people. Get out of the way, let the challenging guests come in. Surrounded and followed by a group of people, Kyle walked into the hall of the gymnasium. Before he carefully looked at the inner situation, an old and full of spirit came from the hall. Hearing this, hundreds of swordsmanship disciples dressed in uniform white kimono spread out respectfully and silently, making way for a spacious and ample space. At this time, Kyle finally saw the inner scene clearly. It could be seen that an old man in kendo suit was sitting upright in the center of the main hall floor, and a beautiful woman in kimono was kneeling beside her. "Are you the current master of the Shinto Wunin School of Swordsmanship?" Kyle looked down, obviously showing a disappointed expression, which made the faces of hundreds of swordsmanship disciples around him sullen. This intruder is really too rampant. Everyone in Risen Tokyo does not know sword old but not old. The master of swordsmanship, even 10 adult youths who come forward, will be easily knocked down by him with a wooden sword. The guest came from afar. "Is it really for the challenge?" Jian Lao asked softly, without the slightest anger, with the demeanor of a master of cultivation. "It's very simple. Today, I want to erase the name of your Shinto Wunin school. Of course, you are only the first one. There are more than 40 kendo schools representing Bushido and Risen Tokyo, and I will also get rid of them." Kyle shrugged and said, as if to do a very easy and ordinary thing. The guest's murderous aura is very heavy, and the tone is not small. Jian Lao waved his hand, and the woman next to him understood what he meant, stood up gracefully, and took down a sword from the shelf under the plaque. The sheathed sword was sent to his side. Kyle didn't stop him either. He really wanted to see it, and Risen admired the level of swordsmanship that has been passed down. The sword master Shishiren got up, and the sharp sword came out of its sheath, with the cold light, pointing forward to Kyle. "As an outsider who invaded our country, you are a challenger to the gymnasium. You first threatened His Majesty the Emperor, and now you want to destroy hundreds of inheritances. The School of Swordsmanship of the Year. Since you are here, don't even think about leaving here. As if he didn't hear the threat, Kyle glanced at the hundreds of swordsmanship disciples around him, and suggested, "Why don't you go together?" Jian Lao froze, holding the hilt of the Tadao tightly with both hands. His slender and deep eyes had a cold light. "You underestimate me." Kyle shook his head and explained, "I didn't just underestimate you, I underestimated everyone present." As soon as these words came out, hundreds of swordsmanship disciples in the hall were so angry that they almost rushed over with their swords. The reason why they didn't rush out was that Mr. Jian couldn't help but made a move. I saw Jian Lao kicking and sprinting forward. His speed was only faster than the healthy young man, and when he was close to the distance of 3 meters in front of Kyle, he stepped and jumped up. He was in the air, raised his hands back with energy, and slashed down the Tadao fiercely. The sharp blade cut across a semicircular arc, trying to cut Kyle in half from the top of his head. Jian Lao's speed was too fast, and the smooth movement of swinging the sword was even more neat, which made all the disciples in the hall exclaim in excitement, and the woman in kimono also smiled. And indeed Kyle remained motionless, as if frightened by Jian Lao's explosive sword attack, and had no intention of avoiding the chopping sword. The fencing disciples watched, and could almost imagine in their minds, the opponent's body was symmetrically divided into 2 halves, and the bloody internal organs spilled all over the place. Under everyone's expectant eyes, Jian Lao's slashing sword brought a cold afterimage. The moment he was about to touch his body, Kyle raised his right hand up and stretched out like lightning, and his thumb and index finger grasped the tip of the sword. The Tadao landed on the right palm protected by the vibrating gold arm guard and the venom leather jacket, without even making a sound. It was chopping extremely sharply a second ago, and then stopped inexplicably and steadily. Empty into the sword. No, this is a scene of ecstasy that surpasses thousands of skills. The swordsmanship disciples were awe-stunned, and the silent needle drop could be heard in the hall of the gymnasium. What was even more shocking was the old Jian. At this time he looked at the right hand catching his Tadao in disbelief, and clenched the hilt of the sword tightly in shame, anger and fear. With all his strength, he still couldn't pull the Tadao out of Kyle's hand. How did you do it?" Jian Lao let go of the sword in horror. "You know, he has practiced high-speed slashing for decades, but he can easily cut off even trees with a big mouth and wrist." "The frog at the bottom of the well," Kyle said in Japanese indifferently. He already understood the distance. The so-called sword master only had a rare green ability card of Zhendao Wunian swordsmanship mastery. "It's my turn," Kyle whispered, and struck out his left fist forward, with a pressure of hunting wind on the end of the fist. It quickly landed on Jian Lao's slightly thin body. 12 times the boxing of a human being. Boom. As if being hit by a high-speed car, Jian Lao flied out like a kite. His body rolled across the hall, crossed a parabola, and landed heavily on the skull plaque 10 meters away. Chapter 104 Demon Card. Bah! The skull plaque on the inner wall of the gymnasium was stained with a large amount of bright red blood, and Jian Lao's fatally injured body fell on the floor, showing no signs of life. The hall was dead silent, and hundreds of swordsmanship disciples opened their mouths wide in horror, sadness, anger, hatred, shock, fear. All complex expressions appeared on their faces. Kyle's expression was indifferent. His clenched left hand was calmly retracted, and the fingers of his right hand, which was wearing a vibrating gold arm guard, were still clamping the tip of the Tadao. Skills are all low grade, only variation is high. The clades in this world are so inexplicable. Strength, speed, nerve response, physical strength, etc. are all beyond the crushing situation. Even if you are unparalleled in swordsmanship, no strange energy is involved. How can you receive his full strength punch after his genetic mutation and strengthening with an ordinary person's body? Only the hidden talents of magic and alien races in the world, and the future black technology products after the 21st century, may be able to surpass his current progress in mutation evolution. The Ancient One's mage organization aims to protect the Earth. The Black Panther Kingdom is safe and secure, and the time limit for the invasion of outer space races and gods has not yet come, and the 21st century is still more than 50 years away. There are no tigers in the mountains, monkeys are kings. During this period of World War II, Kyle dared to walk sideways with no one in his eyes. Anyone who refused to accept came to fight. In the hall of the gymnasium, the woman in kimono stared blankly at the tragic death of Jian Lao. Her beautiful eyes were full of hatred and resentment. She suddenly grabbed the sword in the hand of a fencing disciple beside her, and rushed towards Kyle like mad without her manners. Kyle turned around indifferently, flicked his right wrist slightly, and projected the Tadeo in his hand with a swoosh, piercing through the woman's chest at a high speed, dragging the opponent's body back with a hilt until it was nailed to the door of the hall. Master Sword. Senior Sister. The eyes of the hundreds of remaining swordsmanship disciples in the gym were tearing apart, and they could no longer bear the grief and anger in their hearts. They rushed towards Kyle in the middle of the hall with swords in their hands. Just get up early, Kyle shrugged boringly. The liquid black silk of the venom suit formed a protective hood around his neck, his scarlet and cold eyes flickered like a mask, and his clenched fists held each other. Stretched out the faint dark claws. Full coverage of venom, talon mode. Kyle squatted with both feet, pedaled and sprinted with a little power. His body was rampaging like a man of steel. Hundreds of youths with swords rushed over to meet each other, and they were violently and brutally dispersed into the siege formation. Rushing to the front, several people vomited blood and were knocked backwards and flew out the door. Both feet accelerated and powerfully sprinted, and Kyle's sharp claws slashed and clawed without stopping. Every blow caused a splash of blood, and several young people fell to the ground screaming and screaming. The swordsmanship disciple stepped forward to attack without fear of death. Most of the slashes landed on him, but failed to break through the tough protective coat of the venom suit. Even if the powerful sword strike barely broke through the venom suit and cut a long and thin bloodstain on the underlying muscle surface, but before the blood overflowed, the slight wound was completely restored to its original state. It seems that it is not hundreds of people besieging one person, but more like a liger breaking into a flock of sheep. Kyle turned into a war machine called killing, constantly harvesting weak lives. When the hall of the gymnasium fell into long dead silence again, Kyle gasped for breath, walked out of the courtyard with bloody footprints. The bright sun fell on his devilish red and dark appearance, and he still became cold and quiet cold. Venom quickly disguised himself as Rising's usual clothes, and he returned to his passerby dress identity, and left the sword school gym full of blood and fuel smell in a leisurely and natural way. 3 minutes later, the main gymnasium of the Shinto Union sword sect burst into flames. The fire was so serious that it spread uncontrollably to more than a dozen buildings of the sword school gymnasium. The raging flames devoured everything in the sword sect gymnasium, as well as the centuries-old foundation of the Shinto Union sword sect Tokyo, the residence of the emperor's house. The emperor, dressed in gorgeous and noble robes, was on the altar of the mansion, delivering speeches and statements to nearly 1,000 people in the gate courtyard. His face was majestic, full of peace against a backdrop of his robes, and he looked down on the people as noble as a god. The devil from the American Empire took advantage of the empty air base and committed heinous crimes, but it will soon be sanctioned by the military warriors protected by the gods. Everyone must believe in us. We have the ability and confidence. Seeing that the people below firmly believed in him as a god, the emperor kept a faint smile, and just about to finish the rest of his speech, a subordinate suddenly walked up to the altar, causing his words to stop. The emperor frowned unhappily, but when his subordinates approached him and whispered a few words hastily in his ear, his expression changed in shock. "Well, let's go here first today." The emperor's face was pale, and he finished a few words casually, and then evacuated from the altar with the support of his subordinates. Under the altar, the people who were listening with gusto and relaxed mood were slightly taken aback, looking at each other and discussing, not knowing what happened. The sword school gym of Shinto Union was really buried in a fire. Back in the inner room of the emperor's mansion, the emperor took a deep breath and asked difficultly. The fire broke out and spread too fast. When the fire brigade arrived, more than a dozen gymnasium buildings had been burned down. "We were at the scene and only found this thing," the subordinate said, and slowly took it out of his pocket. "A card. The black demon on the card is grinning outside." The emperor looked at the card, and could no longer sit down on the ground calmly. He took the devil card under him in fear, and took out the card with the same devil pattern on the back of the card from his body. The format and design of the two demon cards are the same, and the material seems to be iron metal. So they were not destroyed in the fire. The patterns on the front of the devil card are Brick 1 and Club 1. He is declaring war on our country alone. Does he want to play a full 54 cards? The emperor said through gritted teeth. His Majesty the Emperor, the subordinate sighed softly. Go and inform Commander Sasaki to allow all the armed forces he stayed in Nissan Tokyo to dispatch. Make sure to fight back. The emperor quietly clenched his fists and said in a cold voice after making a decision, also, let the ninja who sheltered the emperor's mansion organize an act. My safety comes second, and killing that man is my first goal, Your Majesty the Emperor. Absolutely not. Your safety is the top priority, the subordinate persuaded. The Emperor shook his head and said, needless to say, when he has played all 54 cards, our Risandu country will no longer be a country. What's the use of the Emperor and the gods, his purpose? In fact, the subordinate hesitated and did not continue. We are a powerful nation of warriors. How can we bow our heads to him alone? The Emperor glared at him, waved his long sleeves, and said firmly. At this time, Risen was in Jiangsu District, Tokyo. In front of the main hall of Wazyuxin Jianliu Sword Sect. Kyle strode forward, revealing the dark suit as before. He faced several guards at the door and broke in. I am Kyle, come and challenge. Chapter 105 Ninja Organization. Within half a day, 11 sword school gymnasiums in Risen, Tokyo were destroyed. Each school gymnasium was forcibly broken into by the same person, including the owner and all swordsmanship disciples, and the foundation of the school was destroyed by fire. Everywhere, there will be a demon card left, as if to show the identity of the intruder. Demon Kyle. He is like the incarnation of a devil, crushing and flattening the representative schools that are the cornerstone of Bushido all the way, wantonly trampling on the spiritual pillar of the samurai. The people of Risen, Tokyo were once again shocked. While they felt palpitations about Kyle, the invader, they realized for the first time that the warriors with extraordinary skills are also so fragile. Nearly, armed soldiers went out to search and arrest, but Tokyo is too big. It can be subdivided into 4 or 5 large cities, and dozens of well-known sword sect gymnasiums are scattered in various areas. It is impossible to do it at all. To all the deployment and control of military force defense. Risen's strategic analysis experts deliberated on Kyle's whereabouts and goals, and arranged in advance for troops to lurking near these gymnasiums, but the next moment, the genre gymnasiums 10 kilometers away were destroyed when the army rushed all the way to the scene. There was only a messy and bleak black charcoal scorched earth left in place. They didn't know that with Blue Eagles conducting reconnaissance at an altitude of more than 1,000 meters, it would be difficult for Kyle to be surrounded by a large army. After all, people are not machines. Kyle, who is in combat mode, consumes much more physical strength than ordinary people, but with a super soldier's physical fitness and self-healing factor, his physical condition can be restored quickly. But once he was caught in a large army that had already been armed and prepared, he alone, no matter how strong he was, would not be able to completely wipe out the enemy army. He would consume his physical energy violently in the protracted stalemate of the fight, and he would have no time to relax. Moreover, the continuous and intensive artillery attack will exceed the limit of venom protection and the resistance of the mutated body. The healing speed of the self-healing factor cannot keep up with the newly added trauma, and there is also the possibility of death. Kyle has enough awareness of his own strength, so he won't put himself in that kind of life-threatening predicament. During the hide-and-seek with a large army in Tokyo, he successively wiped out 5 more fencing school gyms with vacant defenses, adding up to 16 schools. Nissen lost so many genre inheritances at once, and the last time was the Edo period 100 years ago. One can imagine how much this would hit people who are proud of samurai. Commander Sasaki, who was at the headquarters, was in a hurry, and sent correspondents to the remaining gyms of each school, persuading them to abandon the main gym and go to a safe area for refuge. Yes, asylum. In the eyes of the country, Kyle's threat is no less than the level of natural disasters. However, as a school representing Bushido, they all rejected Commander Sasaki's persuasion. For them, facing a powerful enemy's door-to-door challenge, death is not terrible. If they abandon the main gym because of fear, wouldn't they abandon the Bushido spirit in their hearts? The sword is with the people. And the people are with the museum. This is the unanimous reply of the members of the rest of the gymnasium, a sentence that they think has a lot of backbone. Commander Sasaki found out at the military headquarters, and almost cursed. For the first time, he sighed in his heart. Bushido is harmful, so pedantic and stupid, I don't know how to work around. The enemy is someone else, so it's fine if there is a possibility of victory, but that was Kyle. In less than 2 days, the name of the devil enveloped and suppressed the entire Risen Tokyo. Is it true that we have to wait until the last few school gymnasiums in Tokyo are destroyed before we can concentrate the army to deploy defenses? Commander Sasaki was having a headache, thinking about what to do. A communications soldier excitedly rushed in. The communications soldier saluted and said, "Report, sir. Just got the latest news. The ninja organization protecting the Emperor has left the Emperor's mansion and started operations secretly, requesting our cooperation. Ninjas. Commander Sasaki was taken aback for a moment, then laughed and said, "It seems that the Emperor finally couldn't bear it anymore, and even sent out the ninjas who only protected the Emperor's mansion for a long time." Ninja? That is the elite of the elite, the samurai of the samurai. Every member has power over ordinary people. Unfortunately, this group of organizational power has been passed down and only obeys the Emperor, not under the jurisdiction of the military. Commander Sasaki said in a cold voice, "Cooperate, of course. In this battle, we will use all the firepower of our army and ignore public property and civilian casualties. No matter what the price is, we must kill that man in one battle." Nissan Tokyo, Kana Ward. This is considered as the boundary of the Tokyo metropolis, and the street buildings are far less prosperous than the urban area. Coupled with the invasion of the US imperialists and demons, there are very few pedestrians on the road. However, there is a school gym that is enough to be ranked in the top 10, the Hojo Itsuryu, and it is rumored to serve the demon sword Murasame. When Kyle came to the entrance of the school, he was surprised to find that there was no guard guarding the entrance of the gym, and the main entrance of the main hall was also kept wide open. Have all the people inside been evacuated? Kyle didn't care. It didn't make much difference to him whether the people in the gym stayed on defense or retreated. Destroying the gymnasium and erasing the foundation of the self-proclaimed Bushido is his purpose. Kyle was expressionless, restored the original appearance of the night suit, and stepped into the main gymnasium coldly. When he walked into the courtyard, he realized that the people in the gymnasium had not evacuated, but were kneeling and sitting neatly in the main hall. A middle-aged man in a black robe and kimono sat at the front, and about 50 black-clothed swordsmanship disciples sitting behind him. They all closed their eyes towards the door and meditated. "You are finally here. We have been waiting for a long time." The middle-aged man opened his eyes and looked at Kyle, who was standing tall and straight at the entrance of the main hall. "Demon Kyle, come and challenge." Kyle smiled, and still said the usual opening remarks. "I, Hojo Maru, the 21st generation owner of the Hojo One Sword School." The middle-aged man picked up the Hizen sword with a sheath beside him, stood up slowly, and said firmly, "On behalf of the Hojo One Sword School, I accept your request, challenge." After the words fell, the 50 swordsmanship disciples behind him also got up together, holding the swords that had been prepared earlier, and getting ready to face the battle. Hojo Maru said, neither humble nor overbearing, "I know that if I face you alone, I have no chance of winning, so our people will fight together. That's how it should be." Kyle nodded in satisfaction. His eyes fell on the risen knife held by the man, and he said with a little interest, "Is the rumored demon knife Mura in your hand?" "Exactly. Murasame shouldn't be out of the scabbard, but it's a pity that it's the time of Hojo Itsuryu's life and death, so he can only use it against his ancestors," Hojo Maru said, holding the scabbard in his left hand, and the finely carved sword in his right. From the hilt of the sword, pull out the slender blade Mura inch by inch. Kyle looked at the so-called demon knife. The hilt is an art-level master engraving, the blade is as bright as a mirror, and the appearance is very good. With Risen's ancient craftsmanship, it almost catches up with the sodium carbon steel one-handed sword forged by Howard with high-end technology. But in fact, there seems to be no obvious difference from other Risen knives. Chapter 106 Super Ninja. This school is different from those previous gyms that are overconfident or stick to Bushido. They seem to be very aware of their own weakness, understand the strength of the enemy, and are determined to fight to the death. "Then let's start." Kyle stared earnestly, raised his fists crossed in front of his chest, pointed out the 6 dark claws sharply, and the venom suit also entered a full coverage fighting state. His dark body, which seemed to be born purely for fighting and killing, released a cold and oppressive aura, making people daunting. All the disciples of the Hojo Itsuryu listened to the order. "We will live and die with the gymnasium today, and fight to the last drop of blood." Mortal belief. Draw out the sword in your hand. "Kill!" Everyone in the gymnasium hall roared, raising their swords, kicking their clogs and rushing forward. "Come on." Kyle smiled coldly, without the slightest intention of avoiding it. He lowered his body and sprinted explosively, choosing to fight head-on with one-to-many. He is used to fighting large and small battles with one strike, and for him, it seems like a normal thing. Kyle rushed into the group of warriors at a high speed, quickly raised his right hand to block in front, and immediately nearly a dozen swords slashed forward on the vibrating gold arm guard, absorbing the characteristics of external kinetic energy, and easily intercepted the head on all the cuts that come. He swung the sharp claw of his right hand sideways, and several warriors within half a meter in front of him immediately screamed and fell back to the ground clutching their blood-spattered abdomen. This was only the beginning of the bloody battle, and soon other warriors stepped forward to fill in the gaps. Several Risen knives fell on Kyle's undefended back, but they did not break through the tough protection of the venom suit. Those warriors opened their mouths wide in horror, and in the next moment, their bodies were torn apart like paper by sharp claws, and minced meat and blood splashed down. Kyle seemed to be repeating the same battle as before, ignoring the enemy's sword attack. Even if his body was injured, he was immersed in the killing like a monster. Nearly 10 samurai fell to the ground, and Hojomaru, who was in the midst of the battle, finally couldn't bear it and shouted, "Do it, huh?" Under the siege of many warriors, Kyle raised his scarlet eyes, and was about to look for the figure of the owner of Hojo with his eyes, but two small voices breaking the wind faintly came to his ears. In his field of vision, the two dart-shaped concealed weapons continued to enlarge, bursting and projecting at a nearby speed faster than ordinary bullets, and they were about to be shot into both eyes. With a reflex arc of Kyle's super soldier, there was no time to dodge this unstoppable hidden weapon attack, so he could only close his eyes quickly, and the dart pierced the venom-protected eyelids, causing a subtle numbness and tingling sensation. It's now, Hojomaru and the 9 samurai, who had been hovering at the rear of the battle just now, were looking for an opportunity to step forward quickly, exploding at a speed far faster than before, approaching Kyle who had his eyes closed. Their movements were quick and powerful, and in conjunction with the moment they passed by Kyle's side, one after another swift and violent swings cut through the air, breaking through the protective skin of venom, leaving 10 slender bloodstains on his strong body. Great! Calmly closing his eyes, Kyle sensed that the last warrior was going to retreat from his shoulder. He quickly stretched out his right hand, grabbed the man's calf, and then simply dragged and lifted the enemy's body high, with all his strength. It slammed down hard and landed on the floor. Sixth, little six, after the rest of the blow, the 9 people who withdrew from a safe distance exclaimed. Kyle, who was seriously injured, opened his red eyes and looked down at the groaning samurai youth he had caught. He was also dressed in a black kimono from a school gymnasium, but his card abilities were far from those of the swordsmanship disciples comparable: true mastery of assassination, true mastery of hidden weapons, true mastery of pretending, mastery of poison, mastery of forbearance. There are more than 20 green ability cards, all of which are based on extreme assassination techniques. Among them, there is also a particularly conspicuous blue ability card, Super Ninja, the unique Super Ninja physique, inferior version of Super Soldier, among Risen Warrior's blue ability card. Through a mixture of various poisons and hormones, they are continuously injected into the body of the samurai, and after enduring inhuman pain, they forcibly tap the potential of the human body, and obtain a Super Ninja physique in exchange for the lifespan of the body. The genes in the body are unstable, and the cells will no longer age and die, showing the characteristics of cancer patients. Obtain the top strength, speed, and reaction ability of normal human beings, as well as the physical endurance and resistance to blows at the limit of human beings. Natural life expectancy cannot exceed 50 years. It turns out that Risen really has ninjas. I underestimated you, Kyle sneered, with his right arm wrapped around the neck of the ninja he was holding, and he stood up dragging his injured body. He glanced at the ninja caught in the arms. The ninja's ability to resist blows was really good. He endured the violent blow just now, and consciously kicked his floating feet, struggling continuously. It's a pity that Kyle's super soldier is the upper level of the super ninja, and the mutation evolution is more perfect, and the opponent can't shake the powerful arm at all. Boss, the 8 ninjas who were disguised as swordsmanship disciples looked eagerly at Hojomaru, the leader, and waited for his instructions. Hojomaru shook his head indifferently, ignoring the struggling ninja, and looked at Kyle coldly while holding the blood-stained Murasame. Aren't you the original owner here? Kyle asked with narrowed eyes. The original owner of the museum has long been dead, and here are our ninja organization and the military in disguise, Hojomaru said coldly. You have nowhere to escape. Put down Zaya Aliu. I can still keep you alive to see His Majesty the Emperor. Sorry, I never accept threats from others. Kyle chuckled, his right arm retracted with all his strength, and it clacked and clamped the ninja's neck. He let go of the right arm protected by the vibration gold arm guard, and threw the ninja's body on the floor. You, The other 8 ninjas shouted angrily, but the next scene made them widen their eyes in horror. I saw Kyle standing tall and panting slightly, and the large and small wounds on his body were healing quickly, which looked extremely strange. Hojomaru, the leader of the ninja team, said as expected. Sure enough, as the surviving soldiers of the army said, it has a strong self-healing ability. Kyle frowned slightly. Something was wrong. The opponent had known for a long time that he had a super self-healing power, so why would he stop attacking after one blow and let him delay the recovery? He suddenly realized that his body was abnormal, and touched back with his left hand. The beheading wound caused by the Hojomaru on his back showed no signs of healing, and blood continued to gush out. This is the demon sword Murasame. One hit will kill, the scars caused will never heal, and the blood in the body can only be allowed to flow out. Hojomaru smiled, and raised the murderous blood in the hands of Murasame. Crowdfunding recommendation tickets. Let's open a link for the protagonist. It's almost GG. Chapter 107. Yaodeo Village Rain. It is doped with sodium carbon steel metal, and it is a Risen knife made by Super High Manual Craftsmanship Blue Item Card. The content of sodium carbon steel doped in it is sufficient to exert special effects, that is, tough and sharp, and can inhibit the body's healing factors, causing permanent wounds. After the long-term baptism of blood, the blade has a faint dark red color and bloody smell. Kyle looked at the Murasame held by Hojomaru nearby, and immediately understood the item card information displayed on it. The so-called bleeding demon knife was actually a handmade Japanese mulberry knife containing sodium carbon steel. No wonder the cut wound on his back couldn't be healed even by the self-healing factor. With an injury on his back, Kyle stood calmly on the spot, guarding against the remaining 9 ninjas around him. The super ninja's extraordinary physique, coupled with the insidious hidden weapon that cannot be guarded against, will not be good for him if he drags on. Fighting is possible, but not necessary. Chirp. When the atmosphere in the hall was still at an impasse, a loud eagle cry came from a distant high altitude outside the school gymnasium, and the sound waves with their own penetrating power echoed clearly in the room. The ninja in the gym thought it was just an ordinary eagle, and didn't care, and continued to lock Kyle's body with serious eyes. Kyle heard the familiar crowing of an eagle outside, and his face under the hood of the venom suit changed slightly. This is a warning signal. With this volume, it proves that there is an enemy air fighter team or a large army coming here. Looks like it can't stay any longer. Kyle quietly made up his mind, and glanced around with cold eyes at this time. Hojomaru showed a mysterious smile again. Your physique is really comparable to that of a monster, and you can last for such a long time. It's just a slash. Kyle frowned, and stopped halfway through his words. He felt that the nerves in his body were invaded by something, and his body trembled uncontrollably. He bowed and fell down, barely supporting the floor with its sharp claws. Our weapons and swords are all coated with poison that paralyzes the nerves. The amount you ingested on your body should be enough to paralyze and comatose an adult elephant for 3 days and 3 nights. After Hojomaru finished his confident explanation, Kyle's eyelids drooped, his hands fell on the ground with his hands powerless, and he lost consciousness and fell into coma. Successful. Seeing this scene, the other 8 ninjas breathed a sigh of relief. The sense of oppression given by the man in front of them is too strong, far surpassing any enemy they have ever encountered. As long as he is still standing, no one dared to approach directly. According to the content of the paralyzing poison that invaded his body, there is no doubt that he succeeded, Hojomaru said indifferently, but he did not let down his vigilance. The one who gave the order said, "Little Ziower, you two go over and have a look." The 2 ninjas in the team looked at each other, nodded, and approached the unconscious Kyle from left to right. 5 meters, 3 meters, 1 meter. The 2 cautiously approached to within half a meter of Kyle, and when they found that the other party still had no reaction or consciousness, they were about to let out a sigh of relief when Hojomaru suddenly sounded a warning in their ears. "Be careful, huh?" The 2 ninjas instinctively wanted to retreat. Kyle, who was lying on the ground beside him, flipped over suddenly, raised his hands, and aimed the 2 energy pistols at their chests. "Goodbye," Kyle sneered, and quickly pulled the trigger, only to see 2 bright blue lasers coming out of the gun at such a close distance. Immediately afterwards, under the watchful eyes of everyone in the hall, 2 ninjas who were alive and kicking were pierced by lasers and made a blood hole in their bodies, and fell dead on the spot in a pool of blood. "Ziower," Hojomaru shouted in surprise and anger, and shot a blue laser head-on. He reacted quickly and slashed the laser with Murasame, breaking the laser in front of him, and blue light splashed everywhere. But then, several blue lasers followed one after another, as if they did not target the other ninja members, but concentrated the attack on him alone. Baga, Hajamaru, who has always been calm and composed, couldn't help but burst out the national curse at this time, and quickly rolled to avoid the laser shooting. However, Kyle, as a sharpshooter, predicted the shooting position in advance, so that he rolled a few times. A laser rushed towards Hojomaru's body. Hojomaru shouted, and hastily raised Murasame to block. The strength of his hand was not concentrated, but the laser was barely defended with a blade, and Murasame, who was shocked by the impact, let go of his hand and spun and flew. He got up and wanted to catch Murasame in the air with his hands. A black figure quickly leaped past and caught Murasame's sword hilt one step ahead. Looking at Kyle, who was approaching in front of him, Hojomaru's pupils shrank, and his eyes were dim, revealing a look of despair. Forcing me to use the energy pistol, an extinct black tech consumable, is a bit interesting, Kyle whispered, falling from the air, and Murasame in his left hand quickly slashed. This is a slash for you. In Hojomaru's tragic wailing, an arm flew away from the body with blood. This was already the result of being cut crookedly. Kyle raised the village rein to make up the knife, but he staggered and almost fell to the ground. He ignored the rest of the ninjas and rushed out of the gymnasium hall alone. "Boss!" the remaining 6 ninjas yelled, and they all quickly approached Hojomaru, who was holding his broken arm. Hojomaru collapsed to the ground with a pale face, cold sweat on his forehead. He gritted his teeth to resist the pain of a severed hand, and said hoarsely, "Leave me alone, go and chase the demon Kyle. He has been injured, and he is paralyzed by poison. Nerves, the body is already at the end of its strength. Go, we must not let him run away, understood?" The task must be completed, the ninjas roared in response, and followed the bloodstains to the outside of the hall of the gymnasium. Kyle panted heavily, holding the village rein in one hand and the energy pistol in the other, walked from the main hall to the yard, almost fell into the small pond in a daze. His current situation is very bad. The nerve-paralyzing poison ingested into the body is hindering the normal operation of the body and nerves, and the sensory and motor functions of some parts of the body are beginning to lose. Fortunately, the self-healing factor is tightly suppressed, but once the high-load exercise starts, the nerve-paralyzing poison will spread all over the body together with the blood. Just now, he was able to break out after falling down and counter-killing the ninja, all because of the word dead support. "Venom, once I am completely unconscious and passed out, you will control my body and escape to a safe place," Kyle warned softly, although there are still life-saving skills and cards that have not been used, but the worst of this battle is ready plan. "He's there, don't let him get away." 6 ninjas came out of the main hall, and after seeing Kyle, they approached him at a faster speed. Kyle gritted his teeth and rushed to the main entrance of the gymnasium. The moment his front foot stepped out, a dangerous breath came to his heart, driving him to take back the foot he stepped out. The next moment, a shell shot down at the entrance of the gymnasium, that is, directly in front of Kyle. Under the burst of fire, gravel, dust and blasting air waves swept away. Kyle rolled a few times on the ground in the yard, and when he got up from the ground covered in dust, he was bombarded by continuous and dense rocket launchers, and the main entrance of the gymnasium and the walls on both sides were completely flattened. He looked up and saw everything in his field of vision. The streets outside the gymnasium seemed to be full of Japanese troops. The rifles in the hands of countless soldiers, the muzzles of machine guns, and the muzzles of bazookas were aimed at him alone. Chapter 108 Thrilling Escape. This is an extremely spectacular and shocking scene. There were ninjas chasing after them, and tens of thousands of Japanese armed soldiers set up a defense line in front. Countless pairs of hostile eyes and gun muzzles were concentrated on one person. "This is really not good," Kyle in the courtyard of the gymnasium smiled wryly. The original Murasame and the energy pistol had been turned into cards to recover the card space, and his hands were weakly hanging down, as if he had lost the thought of resistance and escape. "Demon Kyle, you have nowhere to escape, just catch it." An officer stood outside in a safe enough area for the large army, persuading loudly. The ninjas who came out and stopped frowned, and said coldly, "Don't. This devil's methods are weird and changeable, please shoot him immediately." But the officer hesitated for a moment, which made Kyle shrug his shoulders helplessly, and said, "Please, do I seem to have left it to you?" While he was speaking, he suddenly pulled out a blue item card from his lowered palm and held it between his fingers. "Some whole cards have not been used yet. Trying to delay for such a few seconds is just waiting for the opportunity to get out now. It should be almost here. Kyle thought to himself. The open space where he was standing was covered by clouds and mist and cast a large shadow. The surrounding armed soldiers seemed to find something in shock, and some of them looked up to the sky in a riot. What's that, monster? What a big goshawk with blue feathers. It seems to be approaching this way. The officer also raised his head. When he saw the huge blue eagle swooping towards the courtyard of the gymnasium, he seemed to realize something, and exclaimed, "No, everyone fires at me. It's late." Kyle shook his head lightly. A powerful energy tide erupted from the soles of his feet, and the invisible force pushed his body into the sky like a rocket. Sprint in the air. Boom da da da. The dense artillery fire was delayed by less than half a second, and landed on the spot still covered with white air waves, crushing a large amount of gravel and soil into powder. Chirp, the blue eagle that swooped down just happened to arrive at the low altitude of the yard, and perfectly matched Kyle, who had sprinted to the highest point, with his claws. He spread his huge wings that were 10 meters long and flapped fiercely. The fierce gust of wind blew away, and exploded at the low altitude beside it. The blue eagle screamed loudly, broke out from the fire and smoke area of the explosion, and the speed of its wings beating the air raised it to higher altitude, leading Kyle to the high altitude at noon. "Where's the fighter plane? Be sure to stop that monster for me." The officer stared helplessly at the blue eagle that was about to leave, and shouted loudly at the correspondent beside him. At this moment, a small black object fell from the blue eagle and landed on the open space in front of the gymnasium. It was a small black ball with a green light, and it was still rolling on the ground. What? A group of armed soldiers in front of them retreated instinctively. No matter how they looked, it looked like a grenade, but which country's grenade fell from a high altitude for so long without exploding? Dumb thunder? The officer looked at the round object 10 meters away. The green light continued to flash like a countdown, and soon turned to red. Then there is no more then. Diddy. The round object exploded a black hole-like existence and began to devour everything inside. In the blink of an eye, it rapidly rotated and expanded from the size of a fist to become a huge sphere with a radius of 50 meters, covering everything inside, including ninjas, armed soldiers, buildings, streets, trees and rocks, and even the existence of sound and light too. Until the sound source and light are restored in this area, the black hole gradually dissipates, and the bright sunlight shines down again. The inner scene of the Shinya district in Tokyo, with the original gymnasium building as the center, has a huge smooth semicircular hole in the ground. On the border of Tokyo, at an altitude of more than a kilometer. Kyle, who was between the blue eagle's claws, naturally didn't know the consequences of the alien bomb. He was a little delirious now, and more than half of his body was paralyzed and it was difficult to move. Kyle barely opened his eyes, trying to find a safe place, but unexpectedly saw the clouds behind the blue eagle tearing apart, and more than a dozen single-man fighters buzzing towards this side at full speed. There is no end. Kyle has no energy to complain, his mind is muddled, his will and strength are fading. "I really want to sleep." The blue eagle screamed anxiously, and in the hot pursuit of more than a dozen fighter planes, it grabbed Kyle and fled forward at a supersonic speed 10 minutes later. Kyle lost the feeling of grasping his body with his powerful claws, and the cold wind blew from bottom to top. He realized that he was in a falling state of a natural fall. What happened to Blue Eagle? Kyle squinted his eyes, and through the gap, he could see the fragments of the Blue Eagle rushing into the distance and the fighter plane chasing the past. His consciousness fell asleep again. He lost control of his body, and fell straight to the huge snow mountain below. Kyle didn't know how long he slept before gradually regaining consciousness. The first time he woke up, he found himself in a cave with karst tunnels everywhere and a steaming natural hot spring next to it. "Venom, what's going on?" Kyle whispered. He was still wearing a venom suit. It should be due to Venom that he came here suddenly after falling from a high altitude. Venom proudly conveyed his heart to him, but after a while, Kyle understood the current situation. No wonder he was so hungry. It turned out that it had been 3 days since the last battle. When falling down the snow-capped mountain, Venom spread his gliding wings and landed, and then controlled his body to hide in the cave under the snow-capped mountain. "Fortunately, I have you." Kyle let out a sigh of relief and slept for 3 days. Not to mention the nerve-paralyzing poison, even the cut wound on his back was healed. He took off the Venom suit, took out all kinds of hot fresh food stored as item cards from the card space, and quickly ate to replenish his strength. while jumping naked into the nearby hot spring. Comfortable, Kyle sighed. The temperature of the hot spring was just right, which greatly relieved the tension caused by the battle. By the way, this place is comfortable and safe. As if thinking of something, Kyle drew a rare blue creature card from the card space, and under the entity summoning, an oval dome followed suit into the hot spring unhatched monster egg. Current status: in the current environment, the distance to break the shell. There are still remaining 33 years, September and 7 days. Kyle: I can sleep well, brother egg, for more than 30 years. My son probably has all of them. Kyle shook his head, filled his stomach, washed his body, and put on his underwear and venom suit to restore his full power. He followed the venom's inner voice and left the cave where he wanted to go back the same way. He had just walked a few steps when he was surprised to hear subtle footsteps from the naturally formed tunnel next to him. There are people here. Kyle reacted quickly, and the Black Knight was camouflaged against the wall. With the sound of footsteps approaching, a weird risen man wearing a gas mask and white coat appeared in the field of vision. The plot in Risen is a transition and a turning point, and there are about 2 or 3 chapters left to end, and I will send it to everyone early tomorrow to read it, so relax. 8, 7, 7, 6, 9, 3, 2, 2, 0. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109: Mutant Girl. Inside the cave tunnel. Similar to the underground scientific research guards, with Japanese-style guns in their hands, they checked carefully from left to right. After seeing that there was no accomplice behind the other party, Kyle quietly exited from the camouflage mode, rushed to his side with a stride, and hit the back of the neck with a sharp hand. The researcher rolled his eyes, his body went limp, and he collapsed on the ground unconscious. He didn't take a shot to kill him because there are other uses for keeping him. Venom, it's up to you. Kyle patted the battle suit on his body with his hands, and the venom protruded out of the black thread tentacles, twirling in the air, and the tip sank into the back of the scientific researcher's head. In less than 10 seconds, Venom searched for memories, captured some fragments of data, and indirectly fed back to him with his heartfelt voice. Kyle's heart was shocked, as if he heard something incredible. He looked at a cave tunnel in a mountain in amazement. There is a hidden underground research institute here, where almost all the top biological scientists in Risen are concentrated, and they are creating a special human being called Holy Son under the order of the Emperor. The specific details: the venom is also not very clear. What it searches for is only general information, and it becomes more abstract after the transmission of the heart. Kyle was silent for a moment, letting the venom disguise the appearance of the battle suit as a gas mask, a white coat, plastic gloves, and a complete set of protective clothing with boots. He then took the gun and documents from the body of the scientific research guard, and then went underground institute location to walk. In any case, the said special human made him feel slightly concerned. Kyle walked in the direction indicated by the venom. Several natural cave tunnels were formed, and there was a dead end artificially built in the depths. Under the inspection of the ID card equivalent to pass, the wall opened to reveal the inner elevator. After the elevator went down 50 meters, the moment Kyle arrived at the destination, a dazzling light lit up in front of his eyes. The huge basement is brightly visible under the headlights. Various advanced scientific research equipment and glassware are lined up in it, and more than, scientific researchers in white coats and protective clothing are working hard. Quick! Look at what data is wrong. Just now, 2 more experimental subjects of the Holy Son died. Oh, it's K268 and K269. Currently, there is only 1 case of the Holy Son K208 still alive. It's a pity that it's not perfect, but the radiation gene should be the closest to the stable value now. Several biologists, ranging in age from 80 to 30, gather together to discuss. Kyle pretends to be a guard and walks through the basement hall. No one looks at him, and his attention is focused on the data sheet and the test at hand work. Kyle walked unimpeded all the way, and walked to the innermost single room where many compartments were located, and he walked towards one of them as if he had a purpose. In front of the door of the isolated single room, there was an exclusive guard guarding him. When he saw Kyle approaching, he immediately said vigilantly, "What's your number? Don't come near here without permission." Before he finished speaking, his mouth was blocked by Kyle's suddenly stretched out right palm. He raised his body and hit his head on the iron gate, and suddenly passed out half dead. Kyle picked up the key from the guard and opened the isolation room where he was. As soon as he opened the door, a strong smell of disinfection came to his nostrils. Closing the door behind his back, Kyle, who walked into the room, raised his eyes, and everything in the isolated room came into view. I saw that in a small room, with a combination of scientific equipment and medical instruments in operation, there was a huge cylindrical glass sink, which was filled with translucent liquid, and several small pipes were intertwined, soaking in the middle looking at a black-haired girl about 7 or 8 years old. The girl's petite body was naked, as if in some kind of dormant state, curled up and hugged together like a cat. Her white and tender body looked a bit like a porcelain doll. This is the perfect result of the research. Kyle frowned, walked to the glass sink, and touched the glass wall with his left hand. This distance is enough to detect other people's cards. Sure enough, an ability card was suspended on the girl alone. Yep, there aren't any other white and green ability cards, just one, dark blue card, mind control. Gene mutants are gifted with mind manipulation rare blue ability card. Mental power is more than 10 times higher than that of normal humans, and has the innate ability to learn quickly, recognize quickly, and control specific objects to move in space. The mind manipulation effect is related to the distance and weight of the controlled object, as well as the willpower of the controlling creature. Current status, unstable ability, unable to extract, rare blue prefix. The risen people are actually making mutants. Kyle opened his eyes wide in disbelief, looking at the innate ability card that was similar to Logan and was also obtained by a genetic mutant. The present is the macrocosmic environment of the Marvel Avengers movie. Unlike the X-Men universe, another series of mutants, this world is full of mutation, technology, magic, and alien mythology. There are very few natural mutants in existence. The Hulk and Spider-Man are both epigenetic mutations. Black Panther is a legacy. Only the later Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, etc., who actually appeared in the movie, can be regarded as pure mutants. And here, there is actually one. Unfortunately, the signs of life are too weak. It is a semi-finished product. Kyle felt a little regretful. The medical equipment attached to the glass sink clearly showed the characteristics of the mutant girl's heartbeat, and the arc of the electric wave bounced almost became a horizontal line. After all, the level of biology and technology is limited. Although mutants have been created, their vitality is extremely weak, and they can only survive in a vegetative state relying on nutrient solution delivery. Once out of the experimental water tank, it is estimated that it will not survive for 3 minutes in the outside world. It's worthless. Kyle shook his head, turned and left. He just walked to the door when a weak voice came into his mind. Help me. Kyle's body stopped stiffly. He turned around, and stared solemnly at the little girl in the glass sink, who was still sinking and floating in the nutrient solution. Motionless illusion. It is by no means an illusion. Do you want to get rid of it? Then I will help you. Kyle smiled, walked into the glass sink again, clenched his right hand protected by the vibrating gold arm guard into a fist, and slammed on the glass wall with all his strength. Boom. Under the impact of tons, several cracks were cracked on the thick and bulletproof glass wall. Kyle's face was indifferent, and he continued to swing his right fist. The cracks continued to expand and spread, but this noisy sound also attracted the attention of the basement researchers and guards. "God! What are you doing? Stop!" After the two personnel opened the door, they saw the scene of Kyle punching the glass sink inside, and sat down on the ground in fright. As if Kyle didn't hear what they said, his right hand charged back, and he punched the cracked glass wall with all his strength. With a click sound, under the desperate gaze of the medical staff, the tank shattered open, and the inner nutrient solution rushed out with a mutant girl's body. Chapter 110. Do you desire power? Crash! The translucent nutrient liquid flowed all over the ground, and the mutant girl rolled onto the ground curled up with her eyes closed, pulling on the instrument line. Kyle waved his hand, and pulled out a white item card, which turned into a large windbreaker and fell on her naked body. Who are you? Let go of the experimental product. Damn it, if you stay outside like this, she will die. Huddled at the door, the two scientific researchers who couldn't distinguish the situation cursed angrily. Kyle indifferently picked up the Japanese-style gun and aimed it at them, and pulled the trigger continuously. The noise subsided again. Thank you. A faint sound came into his mind again, and Kyle turned his head. The mutant girl on the ground, who was unconscious on the ground, had even weaker fluctuations in the electrocardiogram on the screen of the instrument connected to it, indicating that her vital signs were slipping. Kyle paused hesitantly, pulled out a white ability card without thinking too much, and used it to sink into the mutant girl's body. In just half a second, on the side of the silent ECG screen, the horizontal line quickly bounced and undulated into a curve of great contrast. In Kyle's perception, the mutant girl whose life was cut off on the ground became vigorous, her fair face returned to rosy, and her breathing and heartbeat were clearly displayed. It's actually useful. It seems that your life shouldn't end here, Kyle sighed with emotion. What he used just now was the life extension of the rare white ability card, which can bless people with a natural lifespan of 3 months. This is the first time he tried to use it on a dying person, but he didn't expect to see immediate results. Huh? The mutant girl's eyelashes trembled slightly, and then she opened her big eyes. She half sat up with a windbreaker on her shoulders with a surprised expression, and then looked at Kyle next to her. You saved me. Her lips didn't move, and she was still speaking with the idea of brain waves after she woke up. Of course, Kyle squatted down indifferently, looked at the girl whom some gentleman called Little Lolita, and said coldly, Girl, do you long for longevity and strength? Even with a mutant girl's quick cognitive ability, she didn't fully understand the meaning of Kyle's words, but she still nodded firmly, holding the trousers of the Venom suit with her small hands. That's good. From now on, you must obey my orders, Kyle said, but the girl understood the words and nodded again. Someone broke into the lab. Behind Kyle, there were many footsteps at the door. Several guards in protective clothing were holding firearms. When they entered the door, they fired at the inside. The bullets fell on the back protected by the Venom suit and bounced off one after another. Use your ability to kill them. Can you do it? Kyle said to the girl in front of him without turning back to the guards who shot. His philosophy is simple. I save you, but not in vain. You must prove your own existence here. The mutant girl opened her clear eyes wide and without any hesitation, she turned her attention to the large equipment by the sink. The device seems to be pulled by some invisible force, and it floats weightlessly, but it only moves half a meter towards the enemy at the door, and then stops and falls with no kinetic energy. The ability is not used yet. Try a smaller object. Kyle suggested that he was still being tickled by bullets and shot in the back. The mutant girl nodded, took a deep breath, and looked at the broken glass on the ground again. A few pieces of glass floated lightly, flew towards the door with a swoosh, and pierced the hearts of the guards like a sharp weapon. Good job. Kyle stood up in satisfaction, and at the same time, all the guards behind him fell down. This is rapid cognition. Maybe the girl killed someone for the first time, but her cognitive ability allowed her to deduce very quickly in her mind, if you want to kill someone with a few pieces of broken glass, you need to attack the fatal part, that is, the brain or heart. You will follow me from now on. Carlton paused and asked, Do you have a name? K208. Faced with the answer, the mutant girl replied with her thoughts. That's not called a name. Kyle shook his head, looked at the translucent and clear pupils of the mutant girl, and said, From now on, you will be called Rain Tong Carl, and you can call me, Boss, or Patriarch, Boss. Yutong sent her thoughts and simply selected one. Learn to speak well in the future. Don't use your thoughts to transmit voices, Kyle said with a headache. The girl's voices transmitted through thoughts are very similar to the voice of the heart when the venom was symbiotic, and sometimes the two voices overlapped in the mind, buzzing endlessly. Yes, boss, Yutong said, her voice leaning towards a soft baby voice. I will teach you the rest in the future, and now I will teach you one thing, to kill people. Kyle smiled, and with Yutong, he walked towards the dozen or so guards outside the door who had condensed their resistance. Emperor's residence. The Emperor knelt down in the hall with a haggard face, and his subordinates waited on him quietly. He just sent back the latest news. The demon Kyle is not dead, and he even destroyed the Biological Research Institute next to Mount Fuji, leaving the same demon card as before. Is that man really a demon from hell? Why can't he be killed? The ninja organization, the army armed forces, are all a group. The Emperor sighed heavily, and the dead had passed away. Every night when he went to sleep these days, he woke up from a dream of the semicircular cave in the Shenai district, which was like a curse from God. The Emperor was silent for a long time, and finally made a decision in his heart, and said softly, Go prepare, let the army of soldiers who are still outside Nissan stop the war and withdraw to the mainland, Your Majesty. The subordinate hesitated, not knowing whether he should try to persuade him or not. The Emperor decisively waved his sleeves. Go. The situation has forced us to bow our heads. The man has only been here for less than a week, and Tokyo is about to fall. Let him stay forever, and Risen will not be a country. I believe that the warlords and the cabinet will agree with my decision. Yes, the subordinate nodded and retreated. He knew that this was a sign that the Emperor would choose to surrender. Forced to surrender by an invader, it's shameful, but also very realistic. Only when you have faced that man will you know how terrifying he is. Risen mobilized soldiers from the front lines of the Asian War to return to the mainland. Although he did not explicitly surrender publicly, the scene where he obviously bowed his head and stopped his hands on his own initiative shocked all the countries participating in the war and watching. The high-level leaders of many countries are puzzled. Why did Risen, who was still arrogant and aggressive soon, withdraw his troops on his own initiative? They sent spies one after another, and soon found out the reason behind it and got the exact answer. Kyle, it's that war maniac again, Demon Butcher. In the past few days, Tokyo has closed all news to the outside world. Most people think that Kyle, who went to Tokyo alone, died, but some people in America and Europe do not want to believe it. Unexpectedly, not only did he not die, but he was still alive and kicking around in Tokyo. The General Air Force Base was completely annihilated, more than half of the school gymnasiums that were the cornerstone of Bushido were lost, and tens of thousands of army soldiers and ninja organizations died. It's too violent. After this battle, Kyle gained another nickname, Tyrant. And this is the premise that Risen has not officially announced his surrender. When Risen surrenders and returns, Kyle will be the god on the hearts of the people who yearn for peace. The Unreplaceable Superhero. Chapter 111. United States, Congressman's Office. A goblet with more than half of the red wine slammed down on the floor, and the female secretary retreated timidly to the corner. Counselor Ivan's face was full of ferocity, and he roared angrily, "What are you doing? Risen really needs to prepare surrender," the female secretary replied. "Our people did say that. The Emperor is already persuading the warlords and the cabinet to announce their surrender when the army completely returns to the mainland, a bunch of trash. With the power of a country, even one person can't deal with it." Ivan sat on the office chair, his forehead was covered with cold sweat. He pondered for a long time in panic, and concluded, "We must not let him come back. If he come back, I'm afraid I'm doomed. When Risen announces his surrender in 2 days, that person will come back. Now there is no way to stop this trend," the female secretary said helplessly. "So, if he must die, Risen, and the army, ninjas, and fighter planes can kill him, then," Ivan paused, and asked coldly, "Didn't the Strategic Research Department say today that the 2 rounds of nuclear weapons will not kill him? Is the experimental product basically finished?" "Yes," the female secretary looked at him with palpitations and said, "but there are only 2 experimental prototype nuclear bombs. Even if they are dropped in Tokyo, they will probably only cover less than half of the area." Ivan scratched his head fiercely, and muttered with the bulging veins, "Half is enough. I don't believe that luck has always been on his side. The Master of Hydra and the underground undead will protect us," the female secretary continued to persuade, forcing Kyle, a war hero, to Risen Tokyo. The high-level U.S. imperialists now feel that they have done something wrong, and they will never allow you to use nuclear weapons again. If you make a wrong step, you will have to follow the wrong steps in the future. You can test nuclear bombs to deter other countries, and you can accidentally get rid of powerful competitors. They dare not agree to be the sinners of the ages, but it will not be voluntarily rejected. Ivan made up his mind, narrowed his eyes and said, "Go, use the people we have placed around the high-level people. I will guide and facilitate this matter." "I see," the female secretary nodded. After a day, in the border area of Tokyo, 2 people, one big and one small, with a big difference in body size, walked in the wilderness. Kyle's Venom suit was disguised as a hooded leather jacket, jeans, and leather boots, which made him look more mature and stable. He wore a hood to hide his conspicuous blonde hair. On the other hand, Yutong wore waist-length black hair and a Japanese kimono that was a few sizes smaller. The reason is that even in Kyle's well-stocked card space, there is really no children's clothing, so I can only temporarily find a set of children's kimonos in the Research Institute for her to wear. She kicked clogs and followed behind Kyle. The 1.1 meter short stature did not reach his waist, and her exposed fair skin made her look like a delicate porcelain doll. "By the way, this is for you." Kyle thought for a while, drew out a blue card, and then turned it into a physical throw. Yutong stared at it, and didn't intend to reach out to catch it. The rectangular object was suspended in front of her. Your mind control ability must adapt to the weight of this village rain. When you can move freely 10 meters away from your body, your attack ability will increase by a big step, Kyle pondered. The control of mind strengthening, whether it is strong or weak, is not weak. Manipulating the weight and distance of objects greatly limits the display of this ability. And if it is paired with a sodium carbon steel sword, the effect will be completely different, and there will be a qualitative change. Yutong nodded, half understood, as if she got a toy, and under the control of her mind, Muramame slowly spun around within 1 meter away from her body, around her body. But in this way, why is there a strange feeling? Kyle glanced back, couldn't help complaining in his heart, and said, "Come on, try to attack me." Yutong raised his eyes, and with his mind, he controlled Murasame's sword point to stab him at the back. Kyle didn't look back, and flicked back the fingers of his right hand wrapped in the vibrating gold arm guard, and Murasame flew back with a buzzing sound. "It's too slow, come again." Kyle shook his head lightly. In fact, the speed was already quite fast, and ordinary soldiers could not dodge it without defense, but for him, it was really slow. Too much? Uetomi was a little unconvinced, and continued to control Murasame with his mind to attack Kyle naturally. The consequences are complete failures, but in the process, her mind control ability has become more and more proficient. In this way, the two of them approached the Army General Base in Tokyo. "Okay, let's take a break," Kyle said. Yutong behind him was exhausted, gasping for breath, dragging the village rain with both hands. This should be the last battle in Japan. Kyle stood on the hillside, overlooking the large flat camping base less than, meters below. Rising's top management finally let go. As long as they step up the pace and give the final heavy blow, this straw is enough to crush this thin camel. Kyle was about to leave when he turned his head when he heard something. At the end of the sky behind him, a B-29 bomber could be seen faintly flying across the sky. Immediately afterwards, an object was thrown down. "Wait, can't you?" Kyle opened his mouth wide, and the worst thought flashed in his mind, watching the object fall to the ground 1,000 meters away. Boom! The scorching, harsh daylight glows from the ground beyond the horizon. Kyle's face changed drastically, and he quickly picked up Yutong behind him, and rushed towards the Army General Base at full speed. Behind him, a huge mushroom explosion cloud appeared, rapidly expanding towards the sky and the earth, and the scorching explosion tide washed and destroyed everything on the ground. Nuke, it turned out to be a nuclear bomb. Kyle's eyes were bloodshot, and he grabbed Yutong and raced like a death race, and the blast wave behind him kept getting closer to him. If you can't find enough bunkers, you can directly experience the power of nuclear bombs on the flat ground, and if you don't wait for the future Thanos to snap his fingers, he will be turned into fly ash now. Sprint in the air, rush for me. Hurry up. Kyle stomped on the air, and his frightening speed exploded to a higher level. The Army General Base was in chaos. Countless soldiers fled in despair. Some officers just took off their shirts and were already committing seppuku. Kyle broke into the base with Yutong. He glanced quickly and saw a sealed dry well. He rushed forward, broke the sealed chain with Maria, and jumped down with Yutong. Almost a moment he jumped into the dry well, the blast wave of the nuclear bomb engulfed the base above, and the dust carried the scorching blast wave and poured forcefully into the mouth of the dry well. Squeak! The first thing to scream was the venom, which quickly fell off Kyle's body under the scorching airwaves of the nuclear bomb. Kyle gritted his teeth, supported the wall of the well with his hands, and resisted the little blast waves and radiation damage with his bare upper body. The tough skin and muscles were burned and shredded by the impact energy, and then forcibly repaired under the self-healing factor. The damage and self-healing became a tormenting tug-of-war. Kyle held on tightly. His bones were about to melt under the pain, like a humanoid monster standing still in the aftermath of a nuclear bomb. The first chapter, Marvel's World War II, is over. Tomorrow is a new exciting chapter, thanks to the strong support of book friends all the time. For the sake of hard work in the morning, please vote for me today, CAC. This book is tentatively scheduled to be on the shelves on October, Street of the National Day, and there will be explosive changes at that time, so please join us. Chapter 112, Return of the Hero. At the end of World War II, in May 1944, the United States dropped 2 experimental nuclear bombs in the Nissan-Tokyo area. This is enough to affect the pattern of world wars. The destructive weapons that deter all countries made their debut on the Earth for the first time. The indiscriminate carpet explosions and inhumane radiation far surpassed the previous natural disasters and virus plagues. The whole world was shocked. Under the attack of the nuclear bomb, Rising was forced by Kyle to bow his head, but now he really didn't delay any longer, and declared his unconditional surrender to the whole world within one day of the nuclear bombing. Rising's withdrawal from the Asian battlefield also represents the Second World War in the human history of Marvel Earth, and this is the end of the end. People all over the world cheered for this, and the long-awaited peace period has finally arrived. The streets and alleys of every city in the United States are decorated with lights and fireworks, which are more than 10 times more grand than the previous Christmas. Most people have carnivaled for 3 days and 3 nights without sleep. And during this time, of course, they have not forgotten that the greatest contributor to world peace, the war hero Kyle. After the end of World War II, thousands of people waited patiently for 3 days, but there was still no sign of Kyle's return from the U.S. military in New York. Countless media who wanted to interview were refused outside the White House and military bases, and it was strictly forbidden to ask about this topic. This made the people excited and joyful, and finally noticed something wrong. Why hasn't General Kyle come back yet? Even if the voyage of the pickup fighter plane is delayed, it's time to return to America. God, why didn't our superhero come back? What about Admiral Chester? Won't the military give us an explanation? People in the United States, from the elderly to the young, are looking forward to it every day. The topic of peace at the end of World War II was suppressed by the topic of the hero Kyle has not returned in just a few days, and other countries are also watching and discussing. High-ranking U.S. congressmen felt that they couldn't hide the truth from the public, and were preparing to discuss a cover-up that could handle it. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a message began to spread from nowhere. When the U.S. military dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Risan, Tokyo, Major General Kyle was still fighting there, and no one sent a transport fighter to contact him in advance. As soon as this news spread in New York, the high-level U.S. imperialists consciously wanted to suppress it, but they still underestimated the high level of attention New Yorkers paid to Kyle-related topics. In less than half a day, this news was like a super-large nuclear bomb detonated in the United States. Countless people were dubious, and at the same time, they all caused an uproar. My God, if that's the case, Major Kyle won't. War heroes can't be killed. How could they die in the hands of their own people, one of our own? I'm afraid that the top officials of the country don't regard him as one of our own. There is no statement from the White House, so it should not be acquiesced. This matter must be explained and explained to our people. In the early morning of the second day after the news was spread, countless people poured into large cities such as New York and Washington with great emotion, and the locals organized their own teams. They held large and small signs and went out to parade in the streets, causing the traffic in the urban area to be paralyzed. The sea of people surrounded the White House in Washington and the military base in New York. The top U.S. imperialists panicked, and immediately mobilized the city's police force and military to maintain order and quell the riots, but found that many soldiers and police personnel temporarily asked for leave, and some simply applied for resignation. They put on bright coats and held questioning signs to join the parade member. At this time, the top management of the U.S. empire suddenly understood how much influence Kyle alone had. As a war hero who quelled World War II, and at the beginning of world peace, his prestige undoubtedly reached a terrifying peak that even gods and gods would shy away from him. Go crazy with anger. On the top floor of Stark Industries, Howard, a gentleman in a suit, leaned his back on the balcony fence, looked at the dense crowd of people in the street below, and silently lit a cigarette. The power of a mortal, comparable to God. You really did it, but why, like Steve, never came back? I was still thinking, when I have a child someday, I must let you be the child's godfather. Even the original agreement to have a good drink after the war, manufacture artificial intelligence, develop new energy elements, and build a business empire of weapons and technology. Are all of these things going to be missed? Howard muttered to himself, constantly sighing heavily, smoking a suffocating cigarette with his head bowed alone, and the smoke he exhaled drifted away with the wind. Just then, the phone in his suit pocket rang. Aren't you bothered? Howard irritatedly snuffed out his cigarette, as if he suddenly remembered something. He was stunned for half a second under the ringing of the bell. And many more can call him now. Who else but that person? Howard shivered, and hurriedly took out the old mobile phone in his pocket. After taking a deep breath to calm down, he connected the call with trembling fingers. Howard, Kyle's usual indifferent voice came from the other side of the phone. Kyle, it's really you. Howard laughed loudly, his eyes were slightly moist. and he kissed the old mobile phone forcefully. "Wow, don't be so disgusting, send it to your bunny girls in heat," Kyle said with a chill. The old gentleman became more and more serious after not seeing him for 2 weeks. "Aren't I excited?" "Dude," Howard said angrily and sadly, "it's been more than a week since the war ended, and you haven't come back yet. I thought you were really hit by that nuclear bomb." "Kyle, sorry, I really got caught up." "Howard," he hesitated for a moment, and asked tentatively, "Kyle, are you a human or a ghost now?" "Nonsense, you are a scientific talent. What do you believe in, ghosts and gods?" "I am already outside the central city of New York. There are a lot of people here. The traffic is paralyzed and I can't get in." "You send that special plane to pick me up," Kyle was angry said. Last time, he and Howard had a little discussion on the concept and structure of the helicopter. Before going to Risen, he knew that Howard had already started to modify the structure of the small transport fighter, and created the first compact and convenient semi-helicopter as a special driver. It has to be said that the benefits of having a friend with a top-notch thinking ahead and a technical talent with full hands-on skills are perfectly reflected at this time. The traffic in New York City was paralyzed, not because the people did it for you, Howard complained to the phone, knowing that Kyle had returned safely. His previous dullness and sadness were gone. Howard said with a smile, "I heard that the new president, congressmen, and high-level military officials were forced by the unprecedented demonstrations. They are now gathering at the White House Square in Washington, D.C. to give an explanation for the release of the press conference. The information is." As soon as Kyle opened his mouth, Howard knew what he wanted to ask, and said with a smile, "Yes, it was Nick Fury and I who deliberately spread the intelligence information, trying to use the power of the people to give the high-level U.S. imperialists are putting pressure on you to seek justice." Kyle's heart warmed. He paused for a while, and then said coldly to the phone, "You drive the helicopter over and take me directly to the White House Square. It's also time to clean up some little mice playing tricks behind their backs. Now that he is back, why does he need justice? In this world, whoever has the biggest fist is the last word." Chapter 113, King and Number 039, S landing in Washington. Washington, America. Since the city, New York, where the hero Kyle was born was not the reason, the parade people were not so terrifying that they would fill up the whole city. But it is close to the central city, and it is still crowded and noisy, especially the White House Square, where the top U.S. imperialists are about to give a public speech. Outside the defense line of the speech platform, a large number of media have stood in advance for the inner 3 circles, and the outer 3 circles and further outside. You can't see the end of the crowd at a glance. Among the onlookers, a 7-year-old boy held the shape mold of Kyle in the battle suit with one hand, and firmly pinched the trousers of the uncle next to him with the other, and asked anxiously, "Dad, did the hero Kyle really die?" "How is it possible?" The uncle smiled, rubbed the boy's short hair vigorously, and said confidently, "Major General Kyle, he won't die." The people crowded around also laughed together, and said in agreement, "That is, how could a war hero die? He is a superhero, suppressing the chaos of war, the god in our hearts, probably the same as the captain, just fell asleep somewhere, and will come back after waking up." When they talked about Kyle, they all had smiles on their faces, with confidence and pride, and even the light of hope. The media on the side continued to take pictures and videos, recording this rare scene. It was the first time that someone's prestige was enough to replace a god, and he was revered by thousands of people without any black spots. "I'm coming," with a reminder from the square. All the people and the media who watched the parade immediately set their eyes on the high platform of the White House speech. It can be seen that the new president with a middle-aged Chinese face is walking in front, and the parliamentary politicians in suits and leather shoes, and the generals wearing medals and uniforms, walked out of the gate of the office building under the cover of armed soldiers, and boarded the slightly wider platform one after another. Speech platform. Dozens of politicians and generals stopped in the back half of the high platform, with solemn and serious faces, making the onlookers subconsciously quiet down. The new president wiped the sweat from his forehead, walked forward to the loudspeaker and stopped, facing the people and the media outside the police line below, and said in the usual politician's tone, "Gentlemen and ladies, good afternoon." However, his words were quickly interrupted by the people below. "Your Excellency, please omit the polite foreword. We are here only for an explanation and the truth. Why hasn't General Kyle returned yet?" The new president quickly covered up his embarrassment, stabilized the loudspeaker with his hands, and said, "Major General Kyle, He was about to utter the cover-up rhetoric discussed by the high level just now, but just as he opened his mouth to preach, he choked and stopped. The new president looked down, with countless pairs of eyes full of hope and anticipation, and with his excellent speech skills, he was speechless for a while. Just when the president was in trouble, there was a sudden spiral buzzing noise not far from the sky. Everyone looked up in surprise and saw a new type of aircraft with bamboo dragonfly wings slowly heading towards the White House square. The high platform is close to flying down. The armed soldiers and guards thought it was a terrorist attack, and were about to rush to the high platform to cover the retreat of the high-level personnel, but when they saw a tall figure at the door of the helicopter, they all stopped immediately. In other words, everyone below stopped their movements in a daze, held their breath, and stared at the young man in the suit standing on the door with wide eyes. "It's General Kyle." I don't know who took the lead to shout, and then, Washington Square, which was originally silent, suddenly boiled with excitement. "Our war hero is back." The people raised their arms high and cheered with moist eyes. The huge sound wave spread rapidly, and soon the entire sky of Washington, D.C. was full of jubilant sounds of the hero's return. At this time, the most embarrassing thing was the high-level executives on the high platform, who could only look at the approaching helicopter with bitter smiles and applause. The helicopter stopped at an altitude of 20 meters close to the high platform and was suspended in the air. Kyle nodded, and just jumped down like this, gliding and slowing down a little in the middle, and finally landed lightly in the middle of the speech platform. He was dressed in a night suit, carrying the iconic one-handed sword, standing tall and ruthless on the high platform. Under the blessing of the superhero halo, he immediately became the most dazzling protagonist on the scene, no matter how high the status of the politicians and generals would be below one head. Thousands of people below are still applauding excitedly, and the applause is like thunder. "Major General Kyle, you are finally back." The president turned around, wanting to be polite, but Kyle didn't even look at him, and walked towards the congressmen and generals alone. Faced with the approach of this killing god, the faces of generals who have experienced various battles have changed slightly, let alone those counselors sitting in the greenhouse. Their faces have turned pale. Among them, Congressman Ivan, who was standing a little behind, and several congressmen held their hands nervously, resisting the urge to collapse to the ground in fear. "Kyle," Admiral Chester sighed and stepped forward. "General Chester, it's not as you wished. I'm still back." Kyle stopped and said coldly. "Kyle, no matter what you've been through, it's all my fault. Don't hurt anyone else." Admiral Chester was soon interrupted by Kyle before he finished speaking. "No, you that's right," Kyle sneered. "You're just getting old." General Chester was dumb, but he didn't make a sound to refute. His gray hair looked like a haggard old man. The helicopter remained suspended in the low air, the rope was thrown from the cabin, and Fury slid down to the high platform. Knowing Kyle's return, Howard notified Fury as soon as possible, and then he rushed to the White House Plaza in Washington. "This, of course, has a purpose." "Fury, which ones did you find?" Kyle waved to Fury behind him, and scanned the congressmen in front of him. The congressmen were terrified, not knowing what the war hero wanted to do when he came back. Oh, and that." Fury stepped forward, searching with sharp eyes, and pointed out 3 counselors, including Ivan. The 3 counselors who were named trembled slightly. The rest of the counselors and the general didn't know why, but they subconsciously stayed away from the 3 of them and retreated to a safe distance. "Oh," Kyle nodded indifferently, and walked towards the 3 congressmen. "Major General Kyle, what do you want to do?" "Don't come here." Ivan's eyes flashed a little panic, and he shouted and asked, "This is the White House Square, where congressmen and generals representing the country, as well as the general public and the media under your eyes. Watch your proper behavior." Kyle sneered, pedaling and rushing to Ivan at a faster speed. Before the surrounding armed soldiers could react, his right hand clenched into a fist and landed on the opponent's lower abdomen. Boom! With Ivan's ordinary body, he received the punch with tons of impact, and his whole body was like a ball. He flew back and rolled 5 or 6 meters, hitting the white wall of the office building. His body was completely maimed, half of his body fell into the wall, his eyes were wide open, and he couldn't even figure out that he would die in such a simple and rude way. After so much careful planning, there was no time to fight back at the end. With a bang, the other party trampled him to death like a cockroach. Chapter 114 The Godlike Hero. "Kyle, you?" General Chester's face was horrified, looking at the dead Congressman Ivan. His lips trembled slightly, He sighed and did not speak. Kyle was also shocked by this amazing move, and he was not the only one. The officers and officers near the high platform, the media and the people in the distance below all opened their mouths wide open. It's too bloody and violent, and the other party is still a member of parliament. Your tricks don't work for me, Kyle whispered coldly. His eyes moved away from Ivan's body, and fell on the other two congressmen who had fallen to the ground in front of him. Save me, General, save me quickly, he's gone crazy. Where are the soldiers and guards? Stop him quickly. The two counselors were trembling with fear, and without the gentleman's demeanor before, they struggled to crawl on the ground of the high platform, trying to escape from the area where Kyle was. Kyle's face was indifferent, and he continued to walk slowly towards the two. Kyle, stop it. That's a member of parliament. If you do this, you will disrupt the order of the country. General Chester raised his voice to persuade. Really? Kyle smiled, and said coldly, if the high level is infiltrated by the Hydra organization and doesn't know it, then I don't mind forcibly setting things right and replacing the high-level structure with fresh blood. Hydra organization. General Chester's expression changed dramatically. He looked directly at Kyle, and asked after taking a deep breath, do you have any evidence? I said yes. Why do you need evidence? Kyle said, and came to another member of the Hydra spy, raised his left foot slightly, and this time the opponent really kicked out like a ball. Rolling in the air, it hit the wall pit where Ivan was before. You are so lawless. Even if he is a member of the Hydra organization, he will be punished by law. General Chester frowned deeply. The new president also hurriedly said solemnly, Major General Kyle, although you are a war hero, everything needs to be investigated and found out by the relevant departments. You cannot kill members of parliamentary status based on suspicion alone. Just do what you think is right. I have a clear conscience. Kyle finished speaking, ignoring their warnings or persuasion, and walked towards the last Hydra spy counselor who collapsed on the ground. Kyle, General Chester gritted his teeth, looked at the terrified members of parliament, immediately raised his arms to make a judgment, and with a clatter, dozens of armed soldiers around the high platform aimed at the high platform. Kyle. This scene aroused countless people in the square to exclaim. Kelton paused, glanced at the armed soldiers, and asked bluntly, you also want to be my enemy? The bodies of all armed soldiers trembled slightly, and they were about to put down the guns whose insurance had not been activated. Seeing this, General Chester immediately shouted with an ugly face, what are you doing? You are elite soldiers who maintain the country's law and order. What he is afraid of is not how strong Kyle's individual soldiers are, but what he is afraid of is that Kyle's popular prestige can ignore the laws and regulations and do what he wants to do as he pleases. This is also the main reason why the top US imperialists have always been afraid of Kyle. The armed soldier hesitated for a while, and was raising the gun in his hand again, but the next moment, the people in the square below said in unison, put down the weapon, put down your weapons. What are you doing? What Major General Kyle did naturally has his reasons. Those congressmen must be spies. You use weapons like this to deal with peace heroes and war heroes. The people don't know what's going on now, but they clearly understand one thing, Hero Kyle must be right. Whoever deals with Kyle and stands on the opposite side of him is undoubtedly the spy villain of the terrorist organization. Still driving the helicopter and hovering in the low sky, Howard, who was in the pilot's seat, suddenly laughed when he heard the voices of thousands of people standing up for Kyle. Kyle, this is the real shoulder-to-shoulder god, originally reached the peak of a superhero. After the Battle of Risen, the world returned to peace. Kyle's prestige image in people's minds has already created a golden body of justice comparable to God for him. Under the exaggeration of this enthusiastic voice, dozens of armed soldiers looked at each other and put down their guns one after another. Under everyone's gaze, Kyle made another simple kick, sending the last Hydra spy member into the wall pit. The wall had completely collapsed, slightly burying 3 corpses. General Chester didn't make another sound. He turned around slowly with a tired and old face, bowed slightly and left the high platform ahead of time. The new president was silent for a moment, then his face sank, and he announced majestically, Major General Kyle, you have solved the 3 spy congressmen who endangered national security. In the follow-up, I will apply to the International Security Council to form a department, and those who are still lurking search and eliminate the remnants of the Hydra organization that has infiltrated the world. Specific matters will be supervised by Major General Kyle. This is obviously a happy event, and the people in the square cheered for the president's move on the spot. The reaction was quite fast, and he deserved to be a figure who could become the president. Kyle approved in his heart, walked beside the president, and said out loud, "Now that the war is over, there is no need for a national symbol of conquest and strength. Here, I officially resigned from the post of Major General, War Hero. I'm retired." Before the public and the media could react, Kyle took a meaningful look at the new president and said softly, "As for what you said, leave it to Nick Fury, he is my spokesperson." Fury, who was still standing on the high platform, exclaimed, and was about to step forward to express his opinion, only to see Kyle sprinting up in the air and jumping directly to the door of the helicopter cabin. The helicopter rose in coordination, took Kyle, and flew towards the sky in the direction of New York. Amidst the waves of voices from the public, Fury watched the helicopter go away, and smiled wryly. "Why does it feel like you've been dumped by you again, when Major Kyle, lead him the Howling Commandos as Rear Admiral Kyle, take him a fleet soldier of the battleship." Now that Kyle has resigned from his military rank, he thought he could take a good rest, but he didn't expect that there was still a department that had not applied for establishment. "Next time, we must ask him for extra salary," Fury gritted his teeth. Helicopter leaving Washington City. Howard sat in the main driver's seat, and Kyle and a little black-haired girl in a hooded dress sat in the rear seat. "It's still early. Do you want to go back to the Stark Industrial Building for a drink?" Howard suggested in a good mood. "Let's just take me back to Logan's place, and next time I'll bring Fury along, because there are still children here." Kyle gestured to Yutong, who was sitting next to him. "How did you get back here?" "I asked you just now, but you didn't tell me," Howard asked in surprise, and looked back at the cute and well-behaved Yutong. "You old gentleman, whatever comes out of your mouth is a hooligan." Kyle shrugged, kneading Yutong's little head, and said solemnly, "This kid is also a person like Logan. Special mutant ability. At the bottom of Risen Tokyo's last well, he could only block most of the aftermath of the nuclear bomb with his body, while the explosion waves and radiation damage still attacked Yutong. At that time, Yutong's unintentional burst of hidden mind ability was even enough to surprise Kyle. The establishment of the family in the next chapter is also counted here. I wish you all a happy Mid-Autumn Festival reunion CAC. I have kept the double update for 2 months, so don't keep the rhythm of 1 update a day. Vote, and wait for the outbreak in October. Chapter 115 The Carl Family. On the outskirts of New York, near the edge of Queens, this place is far away from the bustling big cities, but in exchange for enough comfort and tranquility. Surrounded by green forests, an old Western-style manor is located in the open space, casting shallow shadows in the afternoon sun. The helicopter flew directly over the manor from Washington, humming and blowing sand, stones and fallen leaves, and slowly landed on the open space in front of the manor. This big movement, of course, had already attracted the attention of the people in the manor. The door opened, and just as Kyle got off the back seat of the helicopter with Yutong, a beautiful female figure rushed out from the gate of the manor with a cry of surprise, jumping into his arms impatiently. "Kyle, you are back, Lucy." Kyle smiled. A gentle smile rarely appeared on his handsome face. He sniffed the fragrance of the girl's golden hair, and hugged her delicate body into his arms with his backhand. Looking forward, Logan, dressed in denim, also appeared and stood at the gate of the manor, leaning his back on the steps of the multi-story building, and also lit a cigarette with a smile. "Howard. I'm home. Would you like to come in and sit down?" Kyle turned around and greeted Howard, who was in the rear helicopter pilot's seat. Howard smiled, declined and said, "You just came back, take a good rest with your family. I will come to you again in a few days." "No problem." Kyle nodded, and Howard planned to do too many things, and there was no rush at this moment. The important thing now is to check how well Logan's test tasks are doing. Kyle hugged Lucy's small waist with one hand, and waved with the other to signal Yutong to follow. When he approached the manor building, Logan dodged his eyes, and he snuffed out a cigarette nervously and went back into the house first. "Oh, what happened to Logan?" Kyle was secretly surprised, but soon, he understood what was going on. In the main building of the manor, the low-key and luxurious big-top classical lighting is on, and the decoration and furniture are all available. There are more than a dozen rooms, large and small. 3 little girls around the age of 14 were cleaning in servant clothes. Seeing Logan walking in front, Lucy walked in with Kyle's arms and Yutong, and was about to say hello to Logan, who is the owner of the manor. Salute. "Wait a minute, this is the master here." Logan stopped them coldly, waved towards Kyle, and said in a deep voice, The three girls were stunned, looked at Kyle timidly, and quickly bowed their heads to salute. "Hi, patriarch." "Okay," Kyle nodded with a smile. At this moment, he seemed to be surprised to find something. He turned his eyes to a room where the voices of many immature children could be faintly heard. Lucy smiled, and led Kyle closer to the door of the room. The room was actually decorated as a separate classroom, with a desk, blackboard and desk. A man in sunglasses was teaching a security class. There were more than 30 students in the audience. Children around 8 years old are listening carefully. Logan stepped forward and said helplessly, "Boss, I will explain this to you." Explain slowly. "I'm very curious. You shied away from the task of adopting 10 children at the beginning, but now you have taken the initiative to overfulfill the task." Kyle blinked, a little surprised. Why did Logan change jobs so quickly? It worked. "Uncle Wolf. What about your pride as a fighter? Are you really a babysitter?" The second floor of the manor building, the master meeting room. Kyle and Lucy sat on a big sofa with Yutong, while Logan sat alone on the other side and began to report on the mission. In general, it was that Logan originally followed a mission process, bought the headmaster of an orphanage, and planned to adopt 10 children who knew that he discovered signs of child abuse by the hospital staff, so he couldn't help but kill the hospital staff accidentally, and even demolished most of the orphanage. The orphanage was gone, and Logan adopted most of the children in the yard back to the manor on his own initiative. 8 to 10-year-old children, there are 32, he listed as children who can be taught. As for the rest, there are 8 children over the age of 10 who have to undertake the daily housekeeping work of the manor. Although the orphans during the war are young, they are very sensible and obedient. Those children over 10 years old, who do not meet the age requirements of the task, are also very good to replace the manor's daily housekeeping staff. Logan was a little embarrassed. He concealed that he violated the mission conditions anyway. "I have no objection, and you can't say that you did something wrong." Kyle nodded. 40 children, talking more or less, can just be used as the bottom-level personnel to establish family power. He paused, looked directly at Logan and smiled. "In addition, I'm very happy you can finally let go of your own excessive defenses, and are willing to accept and trust others." Lucy also laughed, and replied, "No, Uncle Logan is very popular with the children here." Logan touched his nose in embarrassment. During this time, he did experience another life surrounded by those children. Back to the point, Kyle thought about it, and asked bluntly, "Logan, what do you think? I want you to adopt so many orphans, the Carl family, cultivate talents." Logan responded concisely and forcefully. "That's right. My positioning for the future Carl family is a private organization that is extraordinary and independent from the world. It will not be responsible for the Earth's crisis. Everything will only follow my orders," Kyle said confidently. Why choose orphan children? Because he has the ability to bestow cards. The ability cards of blue quality and above can only be given to one person, so it doesn't matter whether his subordinates have potential or ability. The most important thing is loyalty. Children are cultivated from an early age, and it is easy to brainwash them to form their dependence and trust in the family, and then protect and execute orders from the heart. Otherwise, no matter how strong it is, like the future shield, Karma Taj, etc., they are all betrayed by insiders, and they are almost destroyed, almost falling apart. However, you are wrong about one thing. What I cultivate is not talents, but heroes. Kyle added that the heroes he mentioned refer to the basic abilities of heroes. The heroes in Marvel must have talents and abilities beyond ordinary people. This is basic common sense. In his plan for the future, the bottom members of the Carl family must at least reach the combat power levels of Black Widow and Hawkeye. Otherwise, you are not worthy to call yourself a member of the Carl family. The children downstairs have been trained and grown up. They have passed the test tasks. And only those who are qualified can settle in the family's overseas territory for a long time. They are only the lowest level members of the Carl family. The few of you present are the core members of the Carl family. Kyle's eyes fell on Lucy, Logan, and Yutong respectively. Not to mention Lucy, his fiancée. No matter how weak an ordinary person is, her status is higher than others. Logan and Yutong, two people born with genetic mutations, originally had a rare blue ability, and in the future, if they get a suitable ability card to bless them, they will definitely become the mainstay of the family power. The standard configuration of the full hero lineup. This is the Carl family. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 Goal, Above God. Kyle. Who is this kid? In the master's conference room, Luzai's beautiful eyes fell on Kyle's right side, that is, Yutong, who was sitting on the soft sofa calmly and indifferently. From entering the house to now, Yutong has never moved away from Kyle, as if with an instinctive stickiness. Although Lucy is not jealous because of a child, she is still surprised by it. In fact, she wasn't the only one. Even Logan was a little puzzled. After all, Kyle didn't seem like someone who would take care of children casually. Logan was faintly looking at Yutong, who was sitting directly opposite just now. Lone Wolf Jean's king beast instinct told him that the cute little girl with a hood and long-sleeved sweater in front of him was far less human and animal than she looked harmless. By the way, I almost forgot, Kyle suddenly remembered, rubbing Yutong's little head beside him with his hands, and said, Yutong, say hello to Lucy and Logan. My name is Yutong Carl, I am 8 years old, and I was picked up by the boss in RIS in Tokyo. Yutong's voice was soft, not as cold as before, and immediately made Luzai laugh. Kyle, you really know how to pick up. Lucy stuck out her pink tongue, and glanced at Kyle angrily. She seemed to be a pet and was picked up on the battlefield, and many more. Could this also be a child bride? Luzai thought to herself. Under the nature of a woman, the way she looked at Yutong changed slightly. I have to say that the other party is really cute, with a petite and exquisite body, a small face, delicate and fair skin. Even she has the urge to hug her like a plush doll. Yutong frowned slightly, and moved slightly closer to Kyle's body while sitting as if noticing her abnormality. Kyle asked strangely, what's wrong? She is hostile to me. Yutong looked at Luzai indifferently, and said bluntly. After the words fell, the meeting room fell silent for a while. Kyle and Logan had weird faces, and they looked at Lucy at the same time, which made Lucy blush to hide her beautiful face, said I'll get a drink, and hurriedly fled the meeting room. Logan's reaction was quick. Realizing something, his sharp eyes fixed on Yutong, and he said solemnly, Boss, this girl can read minds. I can't hear your thoughts, and I can't hear the boss's. Yutong was puffed up, and this time he was buzzing with brain waves, causing Logan to subconsciously cover his ears. Kyle seems to have known it a long time ago. After all, this is still one of the abilities of mind control. From simply controlling the space movement of entities, to breaking away from reality, to a deeper level of detection of biological ideas and thinking this is only effective for normal people with weak minds, and it has no effect on people with extraordinary will like him and Logan. Object manipulation, mind sound transmission, mind barrier, and mind reading, these are the mind control abilities under the strengthening of mental power. Logan. This child is the same type of person as you. I simply call it a mutant, Kyle said with a smile. The current world is not like the large-scale genetic mutations in the X-Men universe, but there is no relevant information about mutants, and he decided to give this definition. Boss, aren't you also a mutant? Logan asked curiously. He always thought that Kyle was the same as him. I do have abilities far beyond human beings, but I am fundamentally different from the two of you, Kyle explained. The two of you are born with a genetic mutation, that is, like a racial talent. You are born with special superpowers. After natural growth, you will have a natural instinct when you are a child due to some stimuli. This kind of innate genetic instinct is similar to Luo root claws and self-healing, or Yutong's thought manipulation. There are even some people who can race against the speed of light and time, and can manipulate metal, water and fire. Carlton paused, and continued, I am different. My original body did not have a genetic mutation, and it was not much different from other normal people when I was a child. Later, it was a super soldier potion researched by the military, and it was transformed the day after tomorrow. The perfect human physique obtained by genes. This kind of innate ability acquired by various medicines and radiation, I call it a mutant. His super soldier ability card was copied from Steve, and he skipped the process of injecting the super soldier potion. So that's the case, Logan nodded thoughtfully. After living for more than half a century, it was the first time he heard such a novel classification of ability users. Mutation is equivalent to the second major evolution of the human species, similar to the difference between apes and modern humans. Mutation is a coincidence, breaking the original genetic framework and standing on the same starting line as mutants, Kyle said here, can't help but say with emotion, regardless of mutation or mutation, They are all superhumans who are alone at the forefront of human evolution history. I collectively call them evolvers. Certain races of gods in this Marvel world are omnipotent in heaven and earth, and the Rainbow Bridge spans the galaxy and the universe, but in the beginning, it was not a weak life similar to the original human beings. Through continuous racial evolution, they mastered innate abilities such as thunder or divine power, and then stabilized the altar and built the domain of the gods. The gods are nothing but the top race standing at the forefront of the evolutionary history of the universe species. Looking at it this way, it is obvious why Hulk can rub the gods on the ground in the future. If we can continue to evolve and become stronger, and equip ourselves with high technology, maybe our family can replace the domain of gods in the future. Kyle's words were truly earth-shattering, and Logan, who had always been calm, was so frightened that his whole body trembled. Logan smiled wryly and said, "Boss, it's uncertain whether there are gods in this world. It is very likely that there is no other life in the universe outside the Earth. You haven't seen it outside the Earth, so how do you know there are no other alien races? Maybe there is the Galactic Alliance, the domain of gods where gods live." Kyle smiled and didn't reveal too much. People on Earth are still in the cognition of the frog at the bottom of the well. Only he, who incarnates as the goshawk in the sky, left the well frame long ago, looking at the sea and the stars outside from a long distance. One day, you will understand the meaning of my words. Kyle let go of his thoughts and returned to reality, bickering and saying, "Let's do the initial planning of the Carl family first. In 2 days, I will go out with Howard and take him to a turtle-shaped island in the Atlantic Ocean for investigation and development. The exclusive base of the family power. Then I'll stay here." Logan scratched his head. Did he really become a nanny? "You can start teaching the children here fighting classes," Kyle pondered, with the cold light in his eyes, and said, "After I come back, you and Yutong, the three of us will go to the Soviet Union." Soviet Union? Yes, the Soviet Union. Kyle laughed. He didn't forget some small actions behind the Red Room organization, a training base for Soviet agents during the war. Since there is a debt, it must be settled as soon as possible, and the debt collection can only be done. Chapter 117 Peace Symbol. It was morning, and the mild sunlight fell on the forest, dispelling the white fog and blurring the light and shadow. Kyle was wearing long-sleeved casual clothes and sunglasses, and lay comfortably on the sun chair on the lawn of the manor to bask in the sun. The Venom itself was also on the grass next to the chair, rolling back and forth restlessly on the grass. "It has been 3 days since I returned to New York. I have let go of my identity as a war hero and general, away from the turmoil and killing of the war, and spent a comfortable and long leisure time. Venom. Do you feel that my body has changed slightly?" Kyle frowned and said to himself, the change in his middle finger was not because of his relaxed and lazy state of mind, but the perfect physique that is now at the peak of a super soldier. This feeling of change began to appear after Riss in Tokyo resisted the aftermath of the nuclear explosion. When coexisting with the Venom, this kind of change is not too strong. Once separated from the Venom, one can slightly feel the potential changes in the body. In the card space, he carefully sorted out the ability cards he owns to change his physique, focusing on super soldier and self-healing factor, but he did not find out the potential reason for the change. Did the radiation in the nuclear explosion affect the stable genetic structure in my body? Kyle thought to himself. This change was too slight for his body, and he didn't know whether it was good or bad for a while. At this moment, an extended version of the black gold luxury car drove out from the road opened by the forest, and stopped in the open space at the entrance of the manor building. 2 bodyguards in suits and leather shoes got out of the car ahead of time, and respectfully opened the door to let Luxie and Yutong in the car get out, and then they started to carry the supplies in the rear trunk. There is still a certain distance between the forest where the manor is located and the town. It is often necessary to drive 5 kilometers away to purchase supplies. The cars and bodyguards are recruited and arranged by Howard in advance. Howard, an old gentleman, does things in an orderly manner, and Kyle is still convinced. After so many things, the two are now the closest buddy partners, well, in life and work. "Kyle, we're back," Luzai, who is wearing a sun hat, waved to the lawn in greeting, holding Yutong, who was a few sizes taller, and for some reason, the two had broken the age gap. These days became friends. People with the ability to read minds, in the eyes of those children of the same age, are born with fear and awe. But with Yutong as a real potential bodyguard, Kyle feels more at ease about Lucy's going out. A rolled black and white newspaper was suspended from the bag Luzai was holding, flew over like a bird, and landed on the small table next to Kyle. "Boss, today's newspaper," Yutong said through voice transmission. Kyle, who was still lying down, nodded, picked up the newspaper and quickly flipped through it, and threw it on the table after reading 10 lines at a glance. The main content on the front page of the New York Times is exactly the same as that of these 2 days. It is a full report surrounding him. Stark Industries will hold the World Science and Technology Expo a few months earlier, and the reports about new products that change the world are unfortunately squeezed into the second edition. About the return of war heroes. The remnants of the terrorist organization Hydra lurking in the top ranks of U.S. imperialism, the confrontation between high-level national regimes and folk superheroes, the youngest major general applying for retirement from his post, the new president's replacement of officials and officers for Kyle's rectification, etc. Such messages are bombarded all over the continental United States day and night. The war hero is retired, the symbol of national conquest and strength is no longer there, and the media collectively changed another name for Kyle, peace symbol. Hearing this new name the day before yesterday, Kyle was so dazed that he almost spit out the red wine he was drinking. He's a war madman. How did he become a symbol of peace? The problem is that the general public also agrees with this appellation, which is far higher than the previous devil, killer, and tyrant. Some people raised funds to build peace symbol sculptures in some squares, and the Norwegian parliament is also discussing voting get him this year's Nobel Peace Prize. This has reached the point where Kyle himself can complain. But no matter what, since he decided to build a family power, he planned to fade out of the public's attention and patiently prepare for the future alien invasion. Now Kyle dare not claim to be invincible even within the Earth. Many large and small mysterious organizations are hidden in the corners of the world, not to mention the huge alien universe outside the Earth. The most reliable thing I have now is that apart from the ability to draw cards, it is far more than the preparation time of other heroes for decades, as well as knowing in advance the big plot events that will happen in the future. This is my greatest strength as a time traveler. In just 1 year, I have reached the highest level of a super soldier, standing at the pinnacle of human fame and prestige on Earth, and holding in my hand the endless wealth that is incomparable to country. After decades, where will the Carl family and I go? Even I can't predict it myself, Kyle thought to himself, with enough confidence in his heart. God is strong, and wait for me to climb up step by step. Thanos' infinite love suit is unsolvable. Did you tell him to collect 6 gems slowly? Taking the lead and preparing to deal with the whole cards, Kyle will be invincible and act as a bigger behind-the-scenes boss. Deduction to master everything. Now, at this moment, is the first step. Kyle sat up from the sun lounger, and a tall bodyguard in a suit came to the edge of the lawn, bowed his head respectfully and said, "Mr. Kyle, the boss said that he has flown over to pick you up from the sea. Okay, tell Lucy that you don't have to wait for me for lunch," Kyle ordered, and after the bodyguard stepped back, he glanced at the excited Venom beside him. "Are you going, Gilulu?" The black liquid form of the Venom itself bounced up and turned into a hooded coat on Kyle. An hour and a half later, in the vast Atlantic Ocean, under the bright sun at noon, the helicopter kept spiraling and humming at an altitude of several hundred meters. "Kyle, is it really almost to the turtle-shaped island you mentioned?" Howard in the main driver's seat asked in surprise. Kyle, who was in the co-pilot's seat, glanced down at the sea, nodded and said, "Well, almost. Did you remember correctly? There are no islands shown on the map in the nearby waters," Howard said with certainty. "You'll know later," Kyle smiled mysteriously, and when the helicopter had crossed another 10 miles out to sea, he thought about it, and said to Howard, "Next, you follow the process I said." "No problem," Howard nodded. He didn't believe that Kyle could conjure an island out of thin air. "Now, you give me this helicopter," Kyle said inexplicably. Howard was stunned, and quickly agreed, "No problem, I will give it to you if you want it. I will build another one later, then now, the ownership of this helicopter belongs to me," Kyle pondered, seeing that the card message of the helicopter was still in an unextractable state. He continued, "You take off your seatbelt and stop controlling the helicopter." Chapter 118 Overturning Howard and Number 039, S3 Views. For the extraction of item cards, the extraction time is much faster than the ability card, but at the same time, the restrictions on extraction are more stringent. For example, sand, paper scraps, stones, these items cannot be extracted. However, a box of sand with the golden sand, paper with craft design drawings, stones processed by master carvings, etc., can be included in the extraction category of item cards. The emphasis here is on the measurement of item value. Special items such as out-of-control fighter planes, severely damaged firearms, unstable energy bodies, and grenade nuclear bombs that are about to explode cannot be extracted either. In addition, not other people's personal items. This is the first condition for item extraction. Hurry up. Under Kyle's urging, Howard, who was still hesitant, immediately unfastened his seat belt, moved his hands and feet from the driver's seat, and moved to the co-pilot's seat. However, the card information has not changed, and it is still in a state that cannot be extracted. Isn't it okay? Kyle pondered, got up and moved forward, reached out and turned off the engine of the plane directly. The helicopter hummed and trembled slightly, and began to glide and fall. Howard's face turned pale with fright, and he quickly grasped the internal fuselage with both hands. It's done, Kyle smiled. In his eyes, the quality of the rare green, modified helicopter, changed from non-extractable to extractable. What became? Howard was still in a daze, but after 3 seconds, the helicopter disappeared out of thin air, and the two inside fell from a height of hundreds of meters towards the vast ocean. My God, Kyle, what did you do to the helicopter? Why is it gone? Howard, who was in a natural fall, was stunned. The gentleman's hat on his head was thrown out by the strong wind long ago, and the mustache on his face was blown askew. He could only stretch his limbs weakly, and accelerated his fall to the sea in a big-shaped sea surface. This phenomenon, which can't be explained by science at all, still depends on how his brain is racking his brains, and he can't come up with an answer in time, not to mention the current dangerous situation, which makes it difficult for Howard to maintain his image of a gentleman and scream. Don't worry, what are you afraid of with me here? Beside Howard, who was screaming again and again, Kyle also fell down, and said calmly, fuck with me, then from now on, throw away your past. Those 3 views and concepts, I want to take you, jump out of the frame of the Earth's current well, and subvert everything. As they spoke, the two of them had fallen almost to the surface of the sea. Kyle suddenly reached out and grabbed Howard's suit jacket, and the hooded leather jacket stretched back his dark red wings. Carrying Howard's body, Kyle slowed down and stayed in the air with Venom's gliding ability. When he was close to the sea at a low altitude of 5 meters, he pulled out an item card and threw it down to materialize into a modern speedboat. Kyle slowly landed on the deck, stood firmly and let go of Howard in his hands. Howard leaned on the railing of the speedboat with his feet, gasping for breath. After a long time, Howard calmed down, still staring at Kyle in disbelief and asking, how did you do it just now? This is one of my abilities. I can store items in another space and extract them for use at any time, Kyle explained without hiding anything. With a wave of his hand, several item cards landed on the deck of the speedboat, which were materialized as sun chairs, sun umbrellas, round tables, red wine. It's not scientific at all. Seeing this miraculous scene like a juggling act, Howard couldn't help but smile wryly, but sat on the sun chair unceremoniously, opened the red wine and poured himself half a glass. I never said that this is science. In fact, there are many things in this world that science cannot explain. In the future, you may see gods flying in the sky, magic that makes people out of their bodies, and even across the universe and backtracking time. Kyle shrugged. These actions he did were not to show off, but to help Howard break the outdated conceptual framework of this era. Howard is now the world's top scientific frontier engineer, and his ideas are advanced enough, but in Kyle's view, the technological level and rigid concepts of the old age are tightly bound by this noble soul who is tired of knowledge. Over half a century, master the anti-gravity levitation technology, study the Rubik's Cube, and draw the elemental structure diagram of new energy. This kind of scientific and technological talent is definitely not much worse than the future Iron Man Tony. The only gap is that he was born in the wrong era. Kyle wants to help Howard subvert and break the shackles of this old age concept, making him the biggest help in providing advanced high technology. This is yours. Howard drank a glass first, calmed down from the shock, then poured a glass for Kyle, looked directly at him and asked seriously, Kyle, to be honest, are you a god or an alien? Of course I'm just a human above ordinary people. Kyle chuckled, picked up his wine glass, took a sip of red wine, and said meaningfully, but the future is hard to say. I will become a god, standing among the gods. Come on, do you believe it? I believe it. You are constantly creating miracles, overturning other people's imaginations, and you are the one who often surprises me with your vision and experience. If there is a God, I believe you will also be surprised." Howard laughed. "Howard Stark." Kyle looked directly into Howard's eyes, and said straight to the point, "I can give you a long enough lifespan, and the power of the family will protect you from harm for the rest of your life, and let you see the city of the future, the next place on Earth. The scene of the century, the beauty of science and technology in the alien universe. This is really like the temptation from the devil in a fairy tale." Howard fell into deep thought and asked calmly, "What price do I have to pay?" Kyle smiled, and said something that made Howard difficult to calm down. "It doesn't cost anything." "Why?" Howard frowned. "Because the road I'm going to take is too lonely and long, and blindly using tricks to win over is not to my taste. If you can use scientific resources and walk by my side all the time, that's enough to make me feel gratified." Kyle spread his hands and said boringly, "The other party is one of the few people in this world who he can treat sincerely as a friend." He didn't intend to use strong means to erase this meaning. Howard trembled when he heard the words, and said with emotion when he understood, "Kyle, I made a slip of the tongue just now. It was due to the occupational disease of a businessman who cares too much about gains and losses. If you can really do that, I will give you the entire Stark Industries under my name, and it doesn't even matter if you pay any price. As long as I can keep researching new scientific products and exploring scientific truths in the future, that's enough." This is the true words of Howard, a scientific madman, and it is also the lifelong dream of every scientist, that is, to constantly dig and seek the truth of world science. Chapter 119, Summoning the Dragon Turtle. Kyle and Howard both have their own opinions and ideas, and they are decisive and action-oriented. Sometimes a simple choice of commitment can surpass thousands of things and priceless wealth in this world. After pushing open the skylight this time to speak the truth, Howard is equivalent to tying himself to the big ship. Kyle sinks, he will not escape. Kyle floats, and he also takes off into the sky. In the future, Stark Industries, which has a background of billions of dollars, and a top corporate empire covering a series of industries such as military weapons, high-end technology, and biomedicine, will just stand in hand. As for Kyle, he didn't take Stark Industries seriously at all. What he's looking at now is only the top talent like Howard. However, he can take this opportunity to let Howard get rid of the obvious identity of a business owner and formally transform into a full-time scientific logistics researcher, which is what he wants to see. Stark Industries is secretly classified as the property of the Carl family. On the surface, you can find someone trustworthy to manage it for you. When you feel tired as a researcher, you can be the boss again at any time. Kyle looked directly at Howard, and said sincerely, "I will provide you with a large enough stage and resources to let you flex your muscles and peep into the truth of science and technology. That's it." Howard nodded solemnly, knowing that he was crossing the door of opportunity and choosing a path that deviated from his original life trajectory. "In this case, let's celebrate our in-depth cooperation again." Kyle smiled casually, and raised a goblet filled with more than half of the red wine. Howard quickly picked up the bottle and poured it into his own glass. "Intersect with it. Boss, I should be the one to respect you." Howard shrugged, and raised his head to drink the red wine in the glass first. The last time the two had a preliminary interview and cooperation, they discussed a cooperation project with a 40.00% stake in Stark Industries in a dance hall bar in Europe. This time, the two talked and cooperated for the second time, but they were on a speedboat moored somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean, talking about the ownership of the entire Stark industry and the future of Howard himself. "Didn't you just say that there are no islands on the map?" Kyle finished drinking, put down the cup in his hand, and blinked to Howard. "In the future, something that subverts reality will be revealed together. Don't hide it, it's scary." Howard smiled bitterly and said, "Your existence is the greatest miracle. Now you just turn into an island, and so do I." "Acceptable. This is what you said, so it will be as you wish," Kyle said, walking to the edge of the speedboat deck, looking at the sparkling vast sea. His mind fell into the card space, drawing the purple creature card that had been stored at the top of the creature area. It was also the only purple quality card he held. Super large ancient dragon turtle. Current status: the area meets the summoning conditions. "Do you want to summon it?" "Confirm the call," Kyle said silently. In the next moment, Howard on the speedboat, as well as Kyle himself, all stared wide-eyed at the same time. On the sea area in front of the speedboat, a gigantic monster suddenly appeared in the low sky covered by the shadow cast by the beast. The giant beast looks like a snapping turtle, with a brown body. The biggest feature is that it is big, too big. Among the known creatures on the earth, the giant whale can barely match its half hand. The turtle shell on its back was completely covered by condensed rocks and grasses, and piled up to form forests and mountain peaks, as if it was carrying a giant island. My God! Howard opened his mouth wide in horror, looking at the behemoth Kyle summoned. He took a breath of air and trembled all over his body. In front of this kind of creature, human beings are so insignificant that they can't even be counted as ants. Kyle was also frightened. In fact, this was the first time he summoned the ancient dragon tortoise. The biological entity was far more shocking and frightening than the card information introduced. It should be said that it is indeed a purple creature card. There are cards. But soon, Kyle was no longer in the mood of admiration, because when the body of the giant tortoise suspended in the low sky was completely summoned, it screamed, and the body like a giant mountain fell heavily to the sea below. Kyle, tell me this is not true. Howard was still in a daze, and Kyle next to him grabbed his arm, quickly performed an air sprint, and rushed into the sky under a burst of energy tides. Immediately afterwards, the body of the ancient giant tortoise fell into the sea. Under the weight of tens of thousands of tons, the surrounding sea surface was violently beaten, and waves tens of meters high were set off in all directions. The modern speedboat that was still moored on the original sea rolled up and down like a leaf in the turbulent sea water, and soon even the wreckage disappeared. Kyle took Howard's arm, and gliding with his wings stopped in the air, and the splash of water splashed the two of them. When the waves subsided, since the lower body of the ancient giant tortoise sank into the sea, only the shell was exposed on the sea surface, so it really looked like a turtle-shaped island. Howard was wet in a gentleman's suit, spit out the salty seawater, and said falteringly, "Is this the turtle-shaped desert island you mentioned? This is clearly the largest giant tortoise monster in history. If it is exposed, it is estimated that it will attract the crazy exploration of scientists from all over the world." Almost. As far as I am concerned, it is not much different from a normal island, that is, it can move freely on the sea, Kyle said, gliding forward and landing, taking Howard into the inner part of the island. "You mean, you tamed this giant tortoise?" Howard asked in surprise. "Yes, it will only obey me," Kyle nodded. The biggest advantage of the creature card is the mandatory obedience of the summoned creature. It can be controlled, so it can indeed be regarded as a movable island. Howard pondered verbally, and started to trek into the forest of the island. He and Kyle went to sea today for the purpose of conducting a preliminary inspection of the island, and then proceeding with the planning and design of the base. The wide area on the dragon turtle's back accommodates mountains, forests, lakes, and streams. If he hadn't known the true face of the bottom, Howard would undoubtedly mistake it for a normal island. Kyle and Howard wandered around the island, and finally reached the top of the island's mountain range. Looking down, they could clearly see the outline of the entire back island. As the foundation of the base, it doesn't matter how big you want it to be. Howard expresses a little worry in his heart while expressing emotion. However, will its existence be too conspicuous? Maybe there will be satellites or boats to see it in the future. "I have thought of this too. Don't worry, I will deal with it when the base is ready," Kyle replied. Does he know that Wakanda has the technology to hide the future city of the country? Regarding the manufacture of new elements, jumping the limitations of technology in the current era also cannot avoid a barbaric and advanced place. Chapter 120 Cross-Century Showdown. The super-large ancient dragon turtle stayed in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, and fell into long-term dormancy to completely incarnate an island. When Kyle and Howard, who had drawn up the preliminary design of the base, returned to the New York manor by helicopter, it was too late and night fell. When the helicopter landed in the open space in front of the manor, Kyle stepped out of the cabin, just as a military jeep was coming from the forest road, and the two light beams in front of the car shone brightly on him. "It's so late, who will come to visit?" Under Kyle's surprised eyes, the jeep was parked in the open space next to the helicopter, and a bald young man with one eye and dark skin, who almost had a hidden effect at night, got out of the car first. He was dressed in a dusty windbreaker, smiling and showing a row of clean white teeth. "Fry," Kyle shook his head and laughed. It turned out that this guy, after Fury's stalking against Howard these days, still set him up for the manor where he lives in seclusion. "Kyle, I haven't seen you for a few days." Fury walked this way with a smile, and soon gritted his teeth with a straight face, changed the subject, and said angrily, "It's easy for you to retire, knowing how much I have helped you. Troublesome office work, those who can do more work. This is to show you your talent on stage." Kyle blinked and patted Fury's shoulder comfortingly. Come on, Les. In short, you must pay me extra salary this time, Fury said, staring at Kyle. Kyle couldn't laugh or cry, nodded and agreed. No problem, I will give you double salary, plus excellent employees. Look, who else did I bring here? Fury smiled and moved his body away. A jeep parked behind him was a middle-aged officer with a rough and strong figure and stepped forward. Joseph. Kyle smiled, hugged a big bear, and patted the others back with a little force. Joseph and Fury, both of them are friends who helped him a lot during World War II, and they are also military personnel who can still keep in touch with him. Fury and I resigned, but your position has been promoted, Kyle joked. Joseph, with a rank of major on his shoulders, shrugged and said with a wry smile, this is all because of your symbol of peace. You don't know, General Chester, he dismissed a position of 5-star general before that, but raised the ranks of all the officers who fought with you, he said. If you are willing to come back, he will apply for the military position of a 5-star general for you, Joseph said, looking at Kyle seriously. Forget it. I can't even do the military affairs of a major general, let alone a 5-star general. I won't bother Furui by then, Kyle rebuffed with a calm face, not at all obsessed with the position of the so-called 5-star general. Fury nodded approvingly, and smiled at Joseph. I just said, Kyle will not agree to go back to the military. Anyway, I'm just passing on a message, and I don't intend to intercede for Admiral Chester, Joseph said bluntly. You all came here from such a long distance, so go in and sit down, Kyle suggested, looking at Howard, Fury, and Joseph respectively. Tonight, old acquaintances gathered together. The three guests nodded in agreement, and Kyle, the host, led the way to the main entrance of the manor building. Master, seeing Kyle's return, the two maids in the hall on the first floor hurriedly bowed their heads to greet her. One of the girls approached hurriedly with a small face and announced, the Wolf King and Chayden are competing in the backyard. Oh, there's a fight. Kyle was surprised when he heard it, and the venom on his body that turned into a leather coat became restless. Wolf King, Red Eyes. These are the family code names of Logan and Yutong respectively, and they are usually called like this when outsiders are around. Let's go and have a look together. Kyle waved his hand and led the three of them to the backyard of the manor. Luogen is belligerent by nature, and Yutong is petty and arrogant. The two will have a fight sooner or later. This is what he can predict, but he never thought it would be so soon. Only after a battle is it worth entrusting each other's backs, Kyle said to himself, recalling the confrontation with Steve at a base. That was his long-gone youth. In the backyard of the manor, on the open lawn, under the illumination of the retro lampposts around, Lucy and 30 or 40 children sat on the grass spread out and formed a circle. This was the competition field that the manor family focused on. In the circle, the vicissitudes of life in leather and jeans confronted a cute girl with a hood and a sword. According to age, this is undoubtedly a cross-century confrontation between an elderly man in his 60s and a young baby in his 50s. I'm going to do it, Logan warned verbally, crossed his hands in front of his chest, and stretched out 3 white bone claws at the ends of his fists. This scene made the children next to them exclaim. Just when Logan was about to set off to attack, Yutong suddenly stopped him softly. Wait a minute, huh? Logan was puzzled, and looked up to see Yutong's calf back, and kept taking a few steps back. The boss said, You are a fighter, and I am a mage. When you are fighting, you must leave a certain distance, Yutong said, and stopped 10 meters away from Logan. Yutong imitated the usual Kyle's movements, waving her small hand lightly, and Murasame, who was half taller than her, slung across her back, detached from the leather scabbard under the control of her mind, and floated above her head with a shimmering cold light. Sodium carbon steel. Logan glanced at Murasame with a little fear. After Kyle's daily popularization of knowledge, he knew that the cold weapon made of this material was designed to suppress its own self-healing factor. But fear is fear. He has no reason to give up the dominance of the battle because of his seasoned combat experience. Logan let out a low cry, raised his sharp claws, and stomped backwards to sprint forward. His attack method was undoubtedly the powerful and inhuman beast body, and a pair of bone claws that were as sharp as knives. At the moment when Logan speeded up and approached, Yutong stared earnestly with a small face, and superhuman thoughts were blessed on the floating village rain above his head, and the village rain immediately swept across the night sky with a swoosh sound. Clang clang, Murasame forced Logan to stop, and continued to collide with his own slash and sharp claws, making a series of crisp sounds. From the third perspective, this is a very strange and supernatural scene. Logan with wolf-shaped claws is tightly wrestling with a risen knife that moves out of thin air. It's really troublesome. Logan was a little irritable, looking at Murray, who was knocked into the air by him and then entangled, and glanced at Yutong 5 meters ahead from the corner of his eye. At this moment, he suddenly understood the meaning of Kale's distinction between fighters and mages. Chapter 121 Establishment of Shield. You must attack the person controlled by your mind. Logan was sure to pay attention, and regardless of the pain of the bone claws, he swung violently, knocking Murasame back a few meters away, and then accelerated the sprint to close the distance with Yutong. Yutong raised his eyes, and Murasame, controlled by his mind, took off his momentum and couldn't catch up with Logan's speed at full speed. I won, Logan whispered, and rushed within 1 meter of Yutong. His arm arched for a short period of time, and he stabbed forward with his bone claws. Seeing that his sharp claws were about to fall, Yutong's eyes suddenly glowed with silver light, and she slightly raised her small hands to the sides. Boss said, "You have to hold back in everything." Boom. The air explosion caused by the powerful thoughts swayed from the surface of Yutong's body. Logan's eyes widened, and he found that the bone claws were frozen and could not penetrate half an inch. The invisible air barrier bounced away, and he fell backwards to the ground. This is a mind barrier that is strong enough to withstand the aftermath of a nuclear explosion? This is too. Logan didn't have time to think about it, and the village rain behind him stepped up his attack again, and the flickering swords forced him to roll and dodge in a little embarrassment. It turns out that the strongest here is not the Wolf King, but the Red Pupil. The surrounding children hissed. Seeing Logan, who was at a disadvantage, his eyes changed slightly. Realizing that the situation was not good, Logan stood up with a beautiful backflip, took the initiative to retract the bone claws, and grabbed the rapidly slashing Murasame with both hands. He held the hilt of the sword in one hand, and the other hand grasped the sharp blade without protection. The Murasame, supported by his mind, trembled and buzzed, and the invisible force of his mind pulled and wanted to pull out of it. "I've caught you." Logan held his breath, and used brute force to firmly restrain Murao. Yutong frowned, and tried her best to run her thoughts, but she couldn't regain control of Murasame. The duel between the two began to evolve into a pure tug-of-war between strength and thought. Logan dragged the violently trembling village rain with both hands, and approached step by step. Regardless of the blood overflowing from the cut palm, Yutong raised her small face unwillingly. The silver light in her eyes turned to red, and her black hair swayed slightly on the verge of losing control of her thoughts. Just when the distance between the two was shortened by less than 2 meters, and the children on the field were holding their breaths with high tension, a powerful and calm voice suddenly came from outside the grass. "Stop, it's over." As soon as the words fell, Kyle had already set off to enter the battle, walked quickly between the two, supported Yutong with one hand, and put the other on Logan's shoulder. Panting, Logan let go of the risen knife in his hand, and lay on his back on the ground exhausted, while Yutong was severely exhausted in mental energy, limped down in a slump, and was hugged by Luzai, who rushed forward. Kyle looked at Yutong in Luxi's arms, and said verbally, "I gave you Murasame to increase the attack strength of your mind control, not to limit the variety of your mind control attacks. Just now, Murasame was restricted. You can just give up on Murasame and switch to controlling any other surrounding objects for a second attack. As for you, Logan," Kyle pondered, and said to Logan, who was lying on the ground, "Although mind control is just enough to restrain our body-enhanced evolutionary, the sodium carbon steel material is also just enough to restrain the self-healing ability, but you can still rely on superhuman physique and skills to crush earlier, and even use speed to make the opponent's judgment and reaction unable to keep up with you. This battle looks like a fairy fight, but in essence it is too clumsy and rigid, and there is no highlight for perfect use of one's own abilities." But after this battle, Kyle also knew the two's ability defects and compensation plans. Although Yutong's mind ability is strong, the body is still too fragile. It can be used with a super agent ability card to strengthen the physique and prolong the pitifully short lifespan. In heads up, if Logan hadn't met Yutong, he would definitely be able to play, % of his combat power in pure melee heads up, and there is no suitable card for him yet. If there's enough admin metal, it can bring his body to a whole new level. Wolverine, Kyle thought to himself. Under his gaze, Logan's hair stood on end with a premonition, and he quickly got up from the ground, clutching his injured left palm and saying that he would bandage it. "Okay. Hurry up and go back to rest." I still have to receive guests. Kyle reminded that the people in the manor noticed that there were 3 foreign guests watching from the lawn in the backyard. But maybe they were stimulated by witnessing the inhuman battle just now, subverting their imagination, and now they are still standing there in a daze. The interior of the manor, the reception hall on the 2nd floor. Kyle, I thought you were the only Superman in the world, but I didn't expect there are 2 more, Joseph said with emotion. Fury echoed, yes. I've seen Logan in Germany before. I didn't expect him to be so strong. He can stretch out the claws of beasts from both hands to fight. Howard smiled while maintaining a gentleman's demeanor, but he was the calmest of the 3. He had seen Kyle's various abilities and methods, and now he was no longer surprised. Kyle, why don't you ask Logan from just now, or that little girl to help me? Fury said impatiently. What? What the president said last time, the department aimed at dealing with the remnants of Hydra lurking in the world has been established, Kyle asked with a little interest. The United Nations Council has approved the application, but the specific regulations and items have not yet been implemented, and the name of the department is still tentative. I am here to hear what you mean. After all, this department was originally established because of you. Fury asked Kyle, what do you think of the name Excalibur Bureau? God, Excalibur Bureau? Kyle, with his legs crossed on the sofa, was dumbfounded. It took him a while to get over the name, and he hesitated. Would it be better to call it SHIELD? Fury and Howard were slightly taken aback, as if sadly thinking of a man in tights with a shield on his back. Fury agreed, it's fine. It's called SHIELD, and its full name is Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and the Logistics Support Agency. This newly established SHIELD is not a show. The president requested that our military fully cooperate with this mysterious department. It is also a green light all the way in some cumbersome political procedures, Joseph sighed. After all, it bears the name of Kyle's symbol of peace. Fury looked at Kyle with confidence, and said in a deep voice, now you are the default director. If you are here, I believe SHIELD will become the world's largest, the strongest protective shield of peace. Kyle shook his head and said, no one is more suitable for the position of the first director of SHIELD, and you have a real job after all, right? Fury still didn't give up, and spread his hands and said, without you, the strongest backstage that SHIELD initially built would be gone. Hugging the thigh, this is his main purpose. Kyle thought for a while and asked Howard, do you have a real job in SHIELD? Howard nodded and said, they want to hire me to be the science and technology director of that department, but Stark Industries is too busy with things. I only agree to be a technology consultant for the strategy department in the future. Kyle took a sip of red wine calmly, smiled and said, then I will be the general strategic consultant of SHIELD in the future. Chapter 122 Empowerment. SHIELD General Strategic Consulting. Several people in the reception room on the 2nd floor were stunned when they heard this, and they all showed strange expressions. The peace symbol of the top combat power, as the general consultant of the department, this is even more outrageous than Logan being a nanny. Most importantly, even Fury didn't know there was such a position in the newly created SHIELD. Didn't you let me have a name? The position of Chief Strategy Consultant is a good position. I can participate in the discussion when the department has any major decisions, Kyle confirmed, with his own thoughts and ideas in mind. SHIELD, a mysterious high-end organization dealing with supernatural phenomena and maintaining world peace in Marvel Earth. Trying to use ordinary agents and weapons to fight against alien invasions and even evil gods is doomed to be a thankless position. And in essence, it was originally founded by the remnants of the Hydra organization. As the largest hidden den in the world, the daily annihilation of Hydra can be regarded as a classic case of thieves shouting and arresting thieves. It wasn't until after the 21st century that Nick Fury, as the former director of SHIELD, formed the first superhero force in history, the Avengers, which truly reflected its existence value. Kyle doesn't intend to step into the muddy waters of SHIELD. Even if the new department is clean now, it has a long history of people, and it will inevitably not be infested by the Hydra organization in the future. This is also the original intention of why he founded the Carl family. Only when the power is fully in his hands can he be regarded as the real card and heritage. Whatever you want, you can get a name in SHIELD even if it's a false job. It's better than all the resources provided by the president, Farilla said helplessly with a headache. I'm talking up front. If in the future, I find out that SHIELD is doing evil things like Hydra under a false name, since I can name it to help it establish, I can also defeat it and abolish it. Kyle said the wind is calm, but the domineering and indifferent words in the words made the reception room feel solemn. Howard resolutely raised his goblet to taste the wine. Joseph looked away in awe and fear, and Fury was busy wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. No one dared to question the authenticity of Kyle's words, because the bones of those who had questioned were still lying in the graveyard of the battlefield, and now weeds were about to grow. Peace symbol. No matter how radiant the name of a god-level hero is, it cannot conceal that it was the dark and bloody period of World War II, in exchange for the lives of countless soldiers and the terrifying record of destroying families and countries. In other words, fortunately, all the people in the reception room are old acquaintances. Otherwise, even if the new president and Chester are coming, Kyle will not give face, and deal with him with a little human touch and a pleasant face like now. Fury immediately made an oath like a military order. Kyle, I'm here to assure you that as long as I'm here, S.H.I.E.L.D. will never do anything contrary to its original intention. That's good, Kyle nodded calmly. S.H.I.E.L.D. is a double-edged sword. If it is not used well, it will become a curse. If it is used well, it is also a very useful force. There are many things that the Carl family is inconvenient to intervene in. They can be done boldly through the S.H.I.E.L.D. recognized by the United Nations Council. Logan and Yutong, don't even think about it. However, when S.H.I.E.L.D. was first established, it really needs enough elite personnel to control the market. Kyle pondered for a moment, then said with determination, I have a suitable candidate. Who is it? Fury asked quickly. Don't worry, you've seen him before, and he's still in another place. Kyle thought for a while, opened the dusty little notebook, and looked around at everyone. Use your own intelligence gathering methods to help me tonight. I found all the information about the Red House in the Soviet Union, Soviet Red Room, the rumored super-secret organization. Joseph was taken aback, as if thinking of something, and said even more shocked, wait, are you going to move them? As soon as Fury heard it, he quickly reacted and explained, I don't know. The Soviet Red Room once sent female agents to sneak into the battleship to attack Kyle during World War II. Ambush you? What do they think? Howard couldn't help laughing. It's not good to attack anyone, but Kyle, the god-killing demon, is the target. What about the brain? Don't worry, I've always been reasonable, and I won't touch them casually. I just went to collect a little debt. Kyle smiled faintly, and this sentence shocked everyone present again. Tell a joke. Kyle makes sense. As the night deepened, Howard, Joseph, and Fury bid farewell to each other. After they left the manor, the second floor of the building fell into a long silence. Kyle leaned back on the sofa silently. Outside the door of the reception room, a large pillow acted as a levitation movement of a magic blanket, and Yutong, who was dressed in pink pajamas, came to sit beside him. How is it? Kyle asked, touching Yutong's small head. None of the three guests just now had any ill intentions towards the boss, Yutong said through voice transmission. Okay, I don't need to spy on their thoughts in the future. They are all trustworthy friends. Kyle shook his head and said, he didn't take the initiative to let Yutong do these behaviors, but Yutong still secretly insisted on this approach. As mentioned before, Yutong is his sharp blade. Sometimes for him, all potential enemies with different intentions can be eliminated, including members of the Carl family. Sometimes, people's hearts are complicated and changeable. If you blindly spy on other people's hearts, it is difficult to make real friends, Kyle told Yutong. I don't need friends, as long as I have a boss. Yutong no longer has the ability to convey her voice this time, but said firmly and persistently in a soft and childish tone. Kyle laughed dumbfounded, stared at Yutong next to him, and pulled out a blue ability card from the card space, the Super Agent, that has been stored and has not been used by any family members. Remember what I said when I took you out of the underground laboratory? Life and strength, you deserve it. Kyle held on to the card that others could not see, and pressed it on Yutong's forehead. Under the shining blue light, the ability card bestowed by the girl sank into the girl's body. Super Agent, confer success. The card owner cannot use the ability granted to the card for 3 days. No ability card can be assigned to this creature. Yutong lay unconscious on the pillow. The Super Agent's ability card is equivalent to skipping the steps of reagent preparation and injection, physical exercise and rehabilitation, and strengthening the body under the rapid genetic modification. Super Agent, as the inferior version of Kyle's Super Soldier's ability, the enhancement brought about also tends to comprehensive physical development, strength, speed, physical fitness, anti-strike ability, as well as major changes in metabolism and human aging. Innately possessed the mutant ability of spiritual strengthening, and now coupled with the comprehensive strengthening and mutation of physique, Yutong is definitely now The strongest in the Carl family, second only to Kyle and the symbiotic state of Venom. As a first-level newcomer author, on the Starting Point app, the book review area is expected to usher in a wave of scolding. In fact, if you have no results, who'll recommend to you? Book friends who open Kidian app today have a high chance to see the large advertisement pop-up window of this book, and click to do free activities. Book friends of Genesis are also invited to participate in the Help, Ask for a book list to collect here. No matter how big or small the book list is, joining is the support for this book. As for the rewards, the wealthy bigwigs can contribute money, and those without money can contribute to vote. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, Soviet Red House. The next morning, a bunch of intelligence information about the Red House in the Soviet Union was collected by Fury and Joseph through national and military channels and passed on to Howard. Howard made simplified statistics on the supercomputer and then transmitted it to the Manor by telegram. There are nearly, hidden places suspected to be the Soviet Red House, many of which should be false information deliberately disclosed by the Soviet Union, mixed with some military bases. The most accurate hidden location has a probability of authenticity of less than 10%. This is also impossible, as the cradle of the military empire, the Soviet Union, a spy organization fully supported by the military, no one knows the exact location of the Red House except for some high-level Soviet officials and insiders. Because there have always been only super agents of the Red House who have successfully sneaked into other countries to pretend to be secret spies, and there has never been anyone who can track and locate them in reverse. But fortunately, Kyle had left behind long before that. When Natasha was imprisoned on the battleship, the electric shock collar worn on her neck was the key item. The black technology was produced by Howard himself, so it is naturally not ordinary. In addition to the instantaneous release of high voltage and the hard-to-disable anti-unlock function, the electric shock collar is also equipped with a tiny positioning device. Kyle was very sure that the Red House valued Natasha so much, and when they sent other agents to take her back forcibly at any cost, they would definitely return directly to the Red House base, and then let the professional technicians release the shock collar. Before the shock collar lost its positioning signal, Howard was naturally prepared to collect this information. On the same day, Kyle ordered Logan and Yutong to follow him in order to make a quick decision, and asked Howard to arrange the fastest transport fighter plane to fly from New York to the Soviet Union. At this time, the Red House of the Soviet Union did not know that a nuclear-like big trouble was on the way. Novaya Zemlya in the northern extension of the Ural Mountains, Russia. The desolate plains are extremely vast, and the ice slag and gravel are sticky and spread into frozen soil, while the sky is covered with dark clouds and gray. When Kyle, Logan, and Yutong arrived here, the air temperature near dusk had reached below degrees Celsius, and the dripping water turned into ice. "Boss, do you think that the base of the Red House will really be chosen in such a ghostly place?" Logan breathed out, and a ball of hot air gushed out of his mouth into white smoke. The positioning signal was cut off in this area. There should be an artificial information jammer. Kyle pondered, and looked up. His vision was full of remote and uninhabited wilderness. Since the Battle of Nissan, Blue Eagle has lost its trace, and seems to be buried in an unknown corner of Tokyo together with those chasing fighter planes. Otherwise, at this moment, it should be most useful. Just as Kyle was thinking about trying to search separately, at the end of his sight not far away, a little light of daylight lit up, exploding with dull little mushrooms. This feeling, Kyle and Yutong's pupils contracted, subconsciously tightening their minds. For the two who escaped from the nuclear explosion, this explosion scene is too familiar. Is it a nuclear weapon? Logan was also startled, looking solemnly at the explosion in the distance, but the three of them soon released their overly tense defenses. The main reason is that the mushroom explosion only covered an area of less than, meters, so it was a little disappointing to stop. If this is considered a nuclear bomb, then the nuclear weapon is too weak. I see. This should be the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons research and development experiment site. Kyle shrugged and said, "If you can encounter nuclear explosions wherever you go, it will be really unlucky." "That means we came to the wrong place?" Logan asked in surprise. Yutong raised her face and expressed her opinion through voice transmission. Not necessarily. The most dangerous place is sometimes the safest. If the Red House is around here, then the local personnel who conduct nuclear weapons experiments here should know something about it. Message. That's right. Kyle nodded, agreeing with this point of view. At least the Soviet military will intentionally avoid the area where the Red House is located and carry out nuclear weapon test bombing. Wait for me here, I'll be back soon, Kyle warned, speeding up and rushing towards the shapeless nuclear explosion test area. Got windy. White icy frosty snowflakes, mixed with black scorching dust and black ash, fluttered profusely in midair, and landed on the hooded leather jacket transformed by Kyle's venom. The earth, snowflakes, and air all have a little radiation, but it is nothing compared to the large amount of invading nuclear radiation encountered in Risen, Tokyo. About to approach the nuclear explosion test area, Kyle saw many military tents built together, and researchers wearing white protective clothing coming in and out, so he entered stealth mode and touched it. Kyle approached a researcher, and with a simple and neat hand knife, he dragged the opponent's stun to the back of a tent without his reminding. The venom ejected black threaded tentacles, and the tentacles ruthlessly pierced into the back of the opponent's head, forcibly searching for memories. This cooperation is quite mature and perfect. After a while, Kyle shook his head in vain, and muttered coldly, "A new rookie assistant. There is value in not dying." However, he was not discouraged. Seeing another researcher walking towards the tent, he hid and lurked again, repeating the previous shady method. If it wasn't too troublesome to attract the attention of the Soviet military, Kyle wouldn't mind directly erasing the entire nuclear weapon test team. Fortunately, Venom got the memory information he wanted to know in the second person's mind. This large-scale wilderness area is divided into the Soviet nuclear weapons test site, which can be bombed and tested at will regardless of civilian casualties. The high-level officials have repeatedly warned not to intervene in a mysterious place next to it. There are often a large number of girls in plain white clothes, and they are thrown into the wilderness junction of the radiation area and the mysterious area from time to time, leaving only a scarce food supply, allowing them to fight each other for survival in the harsh environment of extreme cold and hunger. Finally, the surviving girl who got food and survived for a week, her white clothes were dyed blood red, her humanity was cold and numb, and she will be taken away by the people in the mysterious area. It really looks like the style of the Red House, Kyle sneered, retreated out of the radiation area, turned around and called Logan and Yutong, and the three quickly headed to the mysterious area. Wilderness areas outside the boundaries of the fallout area. More than a dozen corpses of young girls in white clothes lay in disorder on the dark brown frozen soil, some with their eyes wide open, and their bodies were covered in frozen stones with numerous scars. On the tragic ground covered by these corpses, only 2 young girls survived tenaciously. Their pretty faces were full of ferocity, and the white skirts on their bodies were stained with blood. It was like wild beasts fighting together with only instinct left. When they had no strength, they used their teeth as weapons to bite each other's necks. Chapter 124 Natasha and Number 039, Essay Enlightenment. Natasha curled up on the ground and trembled all over, weakly trying to get up from the ground. Another girl suddenly stepped forward and sat on her body, her hands tightly choked her slender, fair neck under her bright red hair. The girl's face was pale and haggard, her bloodshot eyes were full of wildness and madness, and she roared hoarsely, "Daimi, why haven't you died yet? Emily, let me go." Natasha held the other's wrist with both hands, and continued to fight pointlessly under the desire to survive. "Natasha, please, give me my breath, you." Natasha trembled when she heard the request of the girl riding on her body. Emily, the only friend who used to be a classmate in front of him, now desperately wants to kill her, fight for the last bit of food, and have the opportunity to continue living and moving forward under the rules of the Red House. This is true humanity and cruel reality. Feelings and compassion are both burdens, and only by treating yourself as a killing weapon that abandons emotions can you survive to the end and become the strongest Agent Black Widow in this organization. Natasha turned her head sideways, and from the corner of her eyes, on the desolate wilderness, there were piles of corpses of girls who froze before they had time to rot. A drop of tear overflowed from the corner of her left eye, and immediately condensed into frost along with the blood. These are the last tears of her life. From now on, that weak female self will be completely wiped out from the bottom of her heart. "I'm sorry, I want to live." Natasha's face turned cold, she kicked her feet up, her body was amazingly flexible and crossed her calves, which also grabbed Emily's neck and pulled her back. "A tooth for a tooth." Emily didn't expect that Natasha still had the strength to fight back. She was surprised and desperately tried to cut Natasha's breath completely. "Emily, you still forgot that I secretly made up for you the fighting lessons. If only one of us is destined to survive, then let me take your share and keep going." Under the cry of Natasha's heart, a cold light appeared in her eyes indifferently, exhausting the last strength of her body. Wrists, waist, and calves worked together. Natasha opened Emily's hands, and the whole person suddenly rolled forward at the same time, and her calves clamped the opponent's neck and turned 180 degrees in the air. With a crisp click, Emily's neck was twisted in the air, and her eyes dimmed and she fell down on the frozen ground. "I won," Natasha panted heavily, and lay down on the cold windy ground with her hands and feet exhausted, her stomach urging and screaming with extreme hunger. She gnawed on the frozen ground with her teeth, and kept crawling and moving her body, and soon stopped beside a small pile of black bread stained with blood and snowflakes. Without even thinking about it, Natasha opened her mouth to bite the small piece of black bread, and swallowed it without chewing too much. Clap, clap, clap. There was an inexplicable burst of applause, and Natasha looked up weakly, only to see a middle-aged man in an officer's uniform pacing and approaching. "Well done, you are worthy of being my daughter, and now you are a veritable black widow." The man smiled happily, and stopped his applause without extravagance. "Taras," Natasha gritted her teeth, her red hair covered her head and her face, and the pupils exposed between her hair condensed resentment and coldness. Taras Romanov, her adoptive father, one of the high-level personnel of the Soviet Red House, trained and urged her to become a cold-blooded spy. "Good eyes. You will become the strongest agent of our Soviet Red House ever," Taras praised, not caring about Natasha's hatred and resentment towards him. "Anyway, everything will be gone after brainwashing meaningless. Eliminate the emotions and memories of the agents, and even erase their humanity, as long as they can complete the espionage and assassination missions issued by the state according to the procedures. This is the Red House, a powerful organization where everything is seamless." Taras was extremely confident about this, and if he took a step forward, he was going to bring Natasha's organization back to the Red House. "Natasha, you look really ugly now." At this moment, a cold and calm voice suddenly sounded from behind. Natasha heard this familiar male voice, and tried to open her eyes wide. The empty pupils reappeared with the splendor of hope. Taras turned around in surprise. On the frozen soil of the vast wilderness behind him came a strange combination of a girl, a young man and a man. The man showed a head of cool hair. Both the girl and the man were wearing hoods and jackets, covering most of his face. "Nearby residents? Don't you know that this is a forbidden area blocked by the military?" Talas asked indifferently, drawing a large caliber pistol from his waist with his left hand. Although there were 3 people on the other side, he also had the top-notch human physique of a super agent. "Reason to fear." The leading young man in the hood didn't even look at him. His eyes fell on Emily, and he said slowly, "Don't lie on the ground and pretend to be dead. The last time I escaped from the battleship, I also lost 10 of my men. A few soldiers. This account has not been settled with you yet. It's all done by other agents of the Red House, and it's none of my business," Natasha explained weakly. Her body was still on the ground in a mess, and she couldn't help laughing as she spoke. She asked, "What you said last time, let me take refuge with you, does that still count?" "Forget it," the hooded youth nodded and responded simply. But such a word is enough to change and reverse Natasha's current situation. She took a deep breath and squinted and said, "Then take me out of here, Logan, go and bring her here," the hooded youth ordered, and the inch-haired uncle next to him immediately ignored Taras, who was holding a gun, and quickly approached Natasha. "You guys, do you think I don't exist?" Taras was shocked and angry. From the beginning to the end, the 3 people who suddenly appeared didn't look him in the face. Now he has even reached a verbal agreement with Natasha, in front of him, to directly take away the top agents trained by the Red House. Taras took the lead and, staring at Logan who was approaching, raised the large caliber pistol in his hand, and said in a cold voice, "If I take another step forward, I will shoot." Logan ignored Talas' advance, which made Talas's forehead bulge with anger, and he pulled the trigger with the gun pointed. Soon, Taras realized that something was wrong. No matter how hard his fingers were, the trigger of the pistol seemed to be imprisoned by a force, and he couldn't press it down to fire the gun. "Boss, I haven't told you to move yet." Beside the young man in the hood, the petite girl looked at Talas coldly. Her eyes shone with a silver light. Taras' face changed, and the pistol in his hand flew out of nowhere, suspended in midair, and aimed at his master in reverse. At this time, Logan, who was not obstructed, had already walked up to Natasha, grabbed it with one hand and easily carried it on his shoulder. Successfully recovered, one Black Widow. I forgot to update this morning, the author's fault, I quickly added it. We'll update later tonight. Chapter 125 The Compromise of the Red House. Who are you guys? Taking aim at the large caliber pistol suspended in the air, Terez raised his eyebrows and raised his hands, finally realizing that he had kicked on an iron plate this time. He looked at Natasha on Logan's shoulder unwillingly, and said in a calm tone, "No matter what, you can't take our people away. This is the area that the Soviet military is focusing on. If anything happens, the nearest Soviet military base nearby will send troops over, Soviet army." The hooded young man smiled faintly, not at all afraid to stop because of this. "How do I feel like I've seen you before?" Terez stared straight at him, frowning deeply, with an ominous premonition in his heart. Terez, on Logan's shoulders, Natasha, who knew she was safe, blinked and said mockingly, "Fortunately, you are still a senior member of the Red House, and you are familiar with intelligence information from all over the world, but now even the man in front of you recognizes him, not come out." Terez frowned and looked at the hooded young man headed by the three, trying to identify them from head to toe. It happened that the young man was facing the past. The half-face covered by the hood was as handsome and cold as a knife, and his blue eyes were bright and confident, with indescribable majesty and oppression. "Wait, you are," he gasped as he recognized it, trembling all over his body. He was beyond horrified. "God, why did that demon god come here? Mr. Kyle, why did you come to our Soviet side? Prime Minister Stalin wanted to see you for a long time, and the US Foreign Ministry didn't notify you." Terez smiled bitterly, and cursed himself that he should have thought of it a long time ago. The man in front of her was the only one who made Natasha turn against the trend and ignore the military threat in the Soviet Union. Meet Kyle, a symbol of peace, a legendary figure who ended World War II, and a godlike superhero in the Americas. "You should know that I'm retired from the US military, right? Now I'm only representing my personal position," Kyle said as he pulled down his hood to reveal his shining blonde hair. With a devilish smile on his face, he said, "During the war, your Red House owed me a little something, and it would be a lot if you count the interest. If you don't mind, I can go to your base near here to sit down and talk slowly." "I understand." Terez was dripping with cold sweat, and nodded heavily in agreement. The moment he knew Kyle's identity, he knew that this matter was not something he could handle alone. Deep in the mysterious area of the wasteland, the base of the Soviet Red House. "Officer Terez is back." The armed soldiers guarding the gate of the base were awe-inspiring, and were about to open the door to welcome them, but soon they were stunned in amazement. I saw Talaz, who was usually high-profile and arrogant, bowed his body, followed a young man with a lowered posture, and led him towards the gate of the base. Behind him was a little girl carrying a sword and an uncle carrying Natasha. "What are you still doing?" Talaz glared at the guard, wiped the cold sweat off his forehead with his sleeve, and said hastily, "Hurry up and open the door. And send someone to notify the high-level staff, saying that there is a distinguished guest coming. There are important things to discuss in a meeting." "Yes," the guard responded quickly. "This is the first time that the Red House has entertained an uninvited guest. Most importantly, the other party's background is too big, and a bad one is a disaster enough to endanger national security. Now that World War II has just ended, the heroes who symbolize peace have come to the door on their own initiative, causing everyone to panic, let alone the Red Room organization that knows it is wrong." Kyle and the others sat down in the reception hall of the main building of the Red House, and the next training agents were called to entertain them as servants. Terez asked for 10 minutes of discussion time, entered the meeting room with the other two high-level officials of the Red House worriedly, and proceeded with closing the door on how to deal with this emergency. The Red House has not been noticed by outsiders for so many years. How did he find it? Norris, who is the supreme leader of the Red House, asked. "It's not important anymore." Terez held his head tightly and said irritably, "The important thing is that we offended Kyle with our sloppy mission before, and now he brought someone to the door to ask for a statement and the so-called debt. He said that he has retired now, and he only represents his personal position, which has not risen to the level of conflicts and disputes between countries. Isn't it enough for him alone?" Another executive of the Red House was very helpless, thinking, if you can compromise and pay a price, resolve this matter peacefully, and ask him to leave the Soviet Union, that is the best thing this time. The result of it would be great if it could be resolved in a reasonable way. After all, no one wants to have a real fight with that man. The problem is, Kyle is very determined to take Natasha away now, and Natasha herself has betrayed the organization's promise. And there is, under the surprised gaze of the other two, Tara's sight and he said that we should hand over the super agent's reagent formula. Absolutely impossible. Norris and the executives of the Red House changed their complexions and refused in unison. With a straight face, Norris said in a cold voice, "The super agent reagent formula is the foundation of our Red House's ability to produce top agents, and it is absolutely impossible to hand it over." Of course I know this, but Kyle also said that if we don't come up with enough sincere items, he will destroy this place in 10 minutes. No, less than 5 minutes. Tara Stanley looked up at the clock and finished the bitter speech of the message. The executive of Hongfeng opened his mouth wide and said hesitatingly, "Is this a negotiation? It's clearly a threat. It's too crazy." Norris slammed his fist on the conference round table, and the dull sound echoed in the conference room. Tara's moved his mouth, but did not say a word. That is, the other party does have the capital and strength to threaten them. Needless to say, the three people who were able to sit in the top positions of the Red House actually knew it well. After some more discussions, when Kyle left them with only 1 minute left, the three senior members of the Red House finally reached a compromise consensus. First of all, Natasha the Black Widow can give up, no problem. Secondly, the super agent reagent formula must not be compromised, otherwise it would rather fight to the death with the opponent. Even if the Red Room base is sacrificed, it will not give the United States the ability to create super agents. But in order to ensure that Kyle would best accept their compromise conditions and go back peacefully, the three of them added another thing to replace the super agent's potion formula. Inside the reception hall of the main building, Kyle sat calmly on the seat by the window. The red houses are all retro large bungalows, and the floor-to-ceiling curtains are all blood red. Under the sunlight outside, the interior is full of red light. Logan and Yutong, both of them had worry-free faces, as calm as if they were in their own manner. Any one of the three of them could destroy the Red House base if the three of them come together. It will basically ensure that the other party has no chance of turning the tables. That's what Kyle calls a quick fix, out in the day, done in the same day. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.